morning era, like probably 15, 20 minutes. But if it's PQE traffic, 3 hours, whatever. So, no, I kind of, normal, like middle class childhood, played sports. No, my parents weren't in the military. I was the oldest of four. Really had zero, designs or any idea I would actually be in the military. And so was playing pretty somewhat competitive soccer. Got looked up by a few colleges. Um, so then, I settled on Manhattan College up in the Bronx of all places, even though it's called Manhattan. But, I thought I'd be playing D1 soccer up there. Ended up redshirting my freshman year. Wasn't really a huge fan of the coach. It's kind of like everything in the movies you see. When the coach is recruiting you, he's like Mother Teresa. Then you actually go play for the guy, and he's Satan himself reincarnated. So what ended up happening was I looked at some other options to get some money to transfer to schools because the little money that I did get from this guy was not going to cut it at another school. So I looked at some things like the Marine PLC. I had a buddy playing for a school in Philly, and basically they didn't have the money to put me on until I was a junior, and so we started looking at different ways of how I could pay for it. Grants, scholarships. They asked me if I was part Native American or part something. I said nope, no dice. So, and then the one guy goes, well, hey, one of my assistant coaches said our school here has this thing called ROTC or ROT something. Yeah, I think it's called ROTC, and I'm like, oh, okay. It turns out your school does too. And so the thought process was to apply for a scholarship at my school and then basically transfer over my junior year and play there. And again, all this is literally just so I could play soccer at some like low-level D1 school. So it's crazy the way things worked out. Like I had zero thoughts of what it really meant to become a commissioned officer and enroll. And I thought like, hey, I'll do my 4 years and get out. And then, sophomore year, was playing a little bit soccer, but slowly I started realizing like the Air Force thing was kind of becoming a little more important to me. Soccer really wasn't. But generally playing soccer, I was kind of in decent shape. So then I decided to get real brave and think, hey, I'll go try and be a PJ or a Crow. And God bless Lieutenant Colonel Russell was his name, was the colonel at my school. I think he kind of looked at me and kind of knew better and said, yeah, I don't really see you as a PJ type, Brian. You probably could do it. It was basically his nice way of telling me, dude, SOF is not your thing, dude. Like, just be grateful. You have gifts, but it's not in that realm. Mm-hmm. So again, I was looking at other things to do, and it was pretty fun. So now I've gone through boot camp. I come home. It's definitely changed my life at this point. I'm still figuring out what I think I'm going to do in the Air Force. And funny story is, it's probably the fall of my junior year. And for you guys, for the background, if you want to become any sort of aircrew position in the Air Force, you go through a board as a cadet. You apply. Generally, the higher scores, if you will, between grades, pilot aptitude, all that kind of stuff, you get a pilot slot. The guys that are sort of like your second and third tier grades wise, you'll get a navigator spot or like a WSO spot, which is what I got. And then sometimes intermixing that, the guys who fly AWACS. So those guys, the guys that you see in the movies sort of doing the air battle management piece, ABMers, that's another sort of another rated aircrew position. So I had no designs on doing it, mostly because it meant extra time in the service. I was gonna do whatever you kid in New York wanted to do. Come right back, go work on Wall Street, be a downtown dude, live my best Gordon Gekko life, and then come in one day during a year, and my commander's like, hey, I just put you in for a flight school spot. And I go, wait, what? And I find out is apparently some kid at UMass, because they were literally in the same region as us, had gotten caught skiing. So he got disenrolled, and now he had this like flight school spot that had already been advocated to him. My colonel just, again, you get lucky. There's a few people in your life over your career that kind of like really shape and kind of mentor you, and this guy was definitely my first one. But so he signed me up for it, and I kind of initially was like, sir, I don't think this is for me. He goes, dude, you were gonna love this. You're literally gonna either fly a B-1 or an F-15E, and if you don't like it, it's fine. You drop out, and they'll find something else for you.
Yeah.
So that's my junior year, and then senior year, I'm starting to kind of wind down, and this was like, late 2000, mid 2001. Economy was starting to kind of slow down in New York. A lot of my friends were freaking out about like what jobs they were going to get, everything else, and I kind of had it made.
Right.
I already had a guaranteed job now at this point. And then, but being in New York on 9/11 obviously removed any doubt that I'm going where I need to be. If anything, I was a little pissed off because I started doing the math, And probably what a lot of us thought was, I'm a cadet at this point. At the best case scenario, I'm at least 3 years away from, A, getting my wings, and B, being certified to fly an aircraft. So we're thinking like this fight's going to be well over by the time I'm commissioned. Sick joke, right? Little did we know. So, commissioned in May of '02. I hung around New York a little bit as an ad lieutenant waiting for my flight school to pop up. From there, I went down to Pensacola Naval Air Station. So this is back when the Air Force, I think smartly, the two strike school slots, which were basically F-15Es and B-1s, they let those guys, basically, they kind of offloaded that training to the Navy. So it was kind of a really cool experience where I'm an Air Force officer, but I'm in a Navy squadron, and it's all Marines and Navy guys with me with some other Air Force guys. So that was actually a really, the Navy and the Air Force are definitely different. The Air Force is very anal, like you will be at work at 7 a.m., you will leave at 4, and if you start flight school on this date, you will get your wings on this date. And there is no like middle ground. The Air Force is very regimented in that way, which is sometimes good and bad. Navy, God bless them, is like, yeah, dude, fucking surf's up, bro. Yeah, you're in this class and you're supposed to graduate around this month, but whatever weather and whatever, and around they'd give you like a 2-3 month waiver.
Yeah,
the Navy was very like, they would throw 300 cadets at a training pipeline, and in their mind, like if we get 150 pilots or NAVs or NFO is the equivalent of WSO, Naval Flight Officer, so like Goose and Top Gun.
Right.
Like, yeah, dude, if we get if half you guys wash out, but we actually get 150 guys, like, cool, success. We don't really give a shit. Like, it was definitely like a big boy program. If you guys are the kind of guys that can go out and get blasted on Pensacola Beach, but you come in and you get your work done and you pass your flights, cool. And if you don't, you'll fail.
Yeah.
And like, it was definitely, it was definitely very big boy from day one. And so...
So as a WSO or like an NFO, or you said NFO, right? Is there a pilot training in that for you? Do they want you to understand how?
Yeah, so I probably missed this part. So before even going down, so the Air Force had a program where if you were going to pilot training, you were not going to go to pilot training until you got your civilian license.
Okay.
So they called it IFT, intermediate or introductory flight training. And then for guys that were going to be guys that had a pilot school slot, you got your PPL, your private pilot license, before you even went.
Okay.
For the WSOs or NAVs that were going, it was called NIFT, Navigator, Introductory Flight Training, and really all they gave you was about 20 hours.
Okay.
And so, at that point, I wasn't really thinking that far ahead. I kicked myself later on down the road because for a discounted price, I probably could have continued on and got my PPL.
Sure.
But once the 20 was over, my 20 hours, I did it up in Connecticut. I was like, I'm done. I'm going to enjoy my last few months in New York before I leave for good.
Right.
So probably a little bit short-sighted on my part. But yeah, to answer your point, you, at least from the Air Force perspective, you went in with at least a good 20 to 50 civilian hours.
Okay.
Yeah. And then as far as the part of your initial curriculum, so for us, it was about 3 to 4 months of ground school. And what was cool about it was everyone did the same ground school. Marines, pilots, Navy NFOs, Air Force pilots that were down there, like everyone went through the exact same course. So once you did that, you transition over to the flight line. And then for us, these things have been since retired, but not the World War II era T-34, but the modern, 70s, 80s T-34. That's what I started out in. And so your first 6 to 8 flights, other than basic navigation, there is some flying that was going on there as well. But then after that, it starts ramping up to, fairly complicated navigation, a lot of land nav, a lot of stuff where there's a hood over you and you got to sort of do just timing, heading, that kind of stuff, see what the winds are doing to you.
Uh-huh.
I mean, looking back on it, it ended up, none of it really ended up ever translating into like what I did in the real world, because there's obviously a jet, there's a GPS, there's so much else going on in a combat aircraft where like you don't have time to, clock chart ground or whatever that terminology was that I forget. But yeah, that was sort of the beginning days of it. So about 3 to 4 months of a prop plane, then switched over to the T1 for intermediate. That's kind of like a business Learjet, and it's the same thing the Air Force uses to train up all their heavy pilots. And then from there, you went to an advanced squadron called VT-86, and you started off in a T-39 Saberliner, which is like a Vietnam era. It was actually really crazy. You flew with active duty guys, mostly Navy and Marines, but a few rando Air Force guys in the T-34. The T-1 and the T-39 was all being flown by retiree contract pilots. And
Okay.
I think literally every single one of them was like a Vietnam era like Navy fighter pilot. And
Yeah.
like I remember one crazy story where it was one of the few Air Force guys, still remember his name, Lynn Coleman. So he was the retired Eglin Air Force Base wing commander, and I ended up doing a cross-country flight with him. So we were just kind of sitting there BS, and he's asking us where he got commissioned. He was an academy guy, I wasn't. And this guy really had some crazy history. I don't know if you guys are aware who Lance Sijon was. Lance Sijon was the first ever Air Force Academy graduate to receive the Medal of Honor. And he was a POW, tried to escape multiple times, ended up unfortunately dying in captivity. So Lance Sijon's a big deal in the Air Force.
Uh-huh.
Lynn Coleman was one of his roommates at the academy. So there's that story. And then I'm making small talk with him, and he goes, yeah, I retired as the wing king at Eglin, and my vice was Bud Day. So like we're just kind of sitting there in awe. Another Medal of Honor recipient, Bud Day, who was a Marine first, then became an Air Force colonel, and got the Medal of Honor and he lived. Him and McCain were pretty tight from what I remember. So it was cool. We had these like legends of like Vietnam era naval and Air Force aviation teaching us.
Yeah.
But it was also crazy because part of your safety brief before taking off was it's you and this 70-ish-year-old pilot in the left seat, you're in the right seat. There's a chance you might get a bird in the face, and what are your actions? And it's like, shit.
I've been flying this plane since before you were an itch in your daddy's crotch.
Oh, yeah. I mean, some of the stories these guys had were insane. Like one guy, Connie Hoffman, I still remember his name, was a C-130 pilot. I think was a spooky pilot for a little bit before they were gunships. They were AC-47s, I believe. He was telling a story about, they'd open up the back. Hey, dude, co-pilot, you got the jet. I'm going to go in the back and see what the loadmaster up there. And he's fucking, blazing weed with the loadmasters. Like, I mean, really, I thought I had done some cowboy shit in my career, but some of the Vietnam era stories were just out of control. But yeah, kind of in the middle of that towards the end of that program, you track select. You either go fighter or bombers. Like everyone else, I wanted fighters. That's when I got very intimately familiar with the whole fiscal year concept of the military. Got called in. It's like, yeah, dude, it's early September. And I'm like, yeah, it sure is. Like, it's still nice out. Yeah, you're not hearing me. I guess I'm not. He goes, yeah, dude, you're not killing it. You're really doing good, but you're not like blowing away the grade curve. And unfortunately, like we just don't have any more B school slots for Strike Eagles. And I was pretty devastated.
Yeah.
Life's not fair. Woe is me kind of shit. But again, looking back on it, like had I gone Strike Eagles, not to be self-deprecating, but like I probably would have maybe been like above average, maybe middle of the road. I really would have to have broken my ass to sort of like maintain, because it's a high performing type of environment being a fighter guy, backseat or a pilot.
Yeah.
And the B-1, I definitely think I found my niche. Like,
so correct me if I'm wrong, because it seems as though like on a strike on a fighter, the WSO actually has. It would seem to me in my mind, the WSO has less to do than they would on a bomber. It's like it almost seems like they control the show on a bomber.
We do control the show on a bomber. I would say for the fighter guys, at least that I've talked to, and having sat in one, generally if you're a WSO on a fighter, you're not just doing air to air, and obviously in today's environment, you're mostly doing air to ground.
Right.
So you're kind of running that show.
Okay.
And I believe, those guys could literally do everything that the pilots could do, I think, other than fire an air-to-air missile.
Okay.
I could be wrong, but like you were still pretty task saturated. And again, if you're a fighter, things are coming a little faster. I mean, the bone, we were pretty maneuverable for a bomber, but we were still a 3G jet limited in combat. And most times to save gas, when we're doing CAS, which we'll get into, we were our wings forward to be as gas economical as possible. So, I mean, those are some rough days where we went off dry on a 9-line, and it was a good solid, sometimes 3.5, 4 minutes to get back over target. So those were pretty hectic times. So, for us, it was the key on going off hot successfully on the first drop was like life or death in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
I mean, I would say definitely ran the show a lot more on the bone. And it was just like a trade-off, I mean, those guys had less play time, did cooler shit. We definitely, in certain parts of Afghanistan, could hang around for 3-4 hours at a time, not leave. Initially our loadouts in OEF and OIF were 14 weapons. 8 and 6, so 14. Eventually, we removed the Bay tank and started going up to 20.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, we would, there were times where we'd be the only jet in country because of weather, and we would, I think my record was 4 separate ticks that all went hot. like just
Wow.
because we were the only guys in country.
Wow.
You know, Vipers couldn't take off from CAF. Strike Eagles and Hogs were like grounded for weather at BAF. So like, you know, being the only game in town was huge for us.
So tell us
Yeah.
about, you know, moving from this one track, fighter track,
Yeah.
to bomber track. What's that look like?
Yeah, so once that happens, and this is all changed. The Air Force has kind of redesigned how they do their pipeline. But basically, what happens after that is, so the B-1 is a 4-person aircraft. It's an aircraft commander, a co-pilot, and then you've got 2 WSOs. And you're dual qualified to sit either seat. There's an OSO seat, which is the offensive system officer. And then there's the DSO seat, which is the defensive system officer. So if you guys remember Dr. Strangelove, think of the EWO who's watching the bomb come up. You know, range gate pull off working. We actually were qualified to sit both seats, and the reason for that was once you got your wings in Pensacola, you then went to Randolph Air Force Base for 4 months of electronic warfare officer school.
Okay.
Okay, so once that happens, now you're basically legally allowed to go attend the B-1 school at Dyess Air Force Base in Texas. Before we did that, you did water survival and then full-up survival school up in Fairchild Air Force Base in Washington. So I'd say all in all, it's probably about a 1.5-year process before you're even allowed to go attend Dyess Air Force Base to start learning now the specifics of how to fly your jet. And so what that looks like is you show up similar to like flight school where it's a few months of ground school, a lot of sims, and then eventually you get kicked over to the flight line and you start flying, you know, the line with the schoolhouse. And it's the FTU, which is the flight training unit. And so the way I describe it is IQC the initial qualification course. That's teaching you how to just safely operate the jet. And then once that happens, there's 3 combat B-1 squadrons in the world. There's one at Dyess Air Force Base, which is the 9th down the road from the schoolhouse. And then there's 2 up north at Ellsworth Air Force Base, and it's the 37th and the 34th. What was cool about that was the 37th and 34th were part of the Doolittle Raiders. So like Jimmy,
cool,
we call the 28th operations group up at Ellsworth. It's called the Doolittle Raiders because we're direct lineage from Jimmy Doolittle.
Yeah.
If you guys go back and look at some of the pictures, and I'll show you. You know, there's pictures of Jimmy Doolittle sitting there on the carrier, and the guys sitting next to him were all wearing the 34th Bomb Squadron patch, which is the same one that I wore.
Yeah.
So that was really cool. Like, you know, for being the youngest service, right? Only been around since '47, to be in a squadron that had like a direct reach back to like the World War II era was actually really cool.
Yeah.
So did that again about a 1.5 years or so, I'd say, to learn the jet, and a lot of it was maintenance too. The B-1 historically was definitely a maintenance problem child. So we got up there I got up to Ellsworth in late '05 to join the 34th Bomb Squadron, and kind of similar to what I'd said before about 9/11. You know, at this point now, you probably know better than I do, but I'd say 04-ish, 05, Iraq was still a mess, but Afghanistan was kind of quiet. You didn't really see a lot of the insurgent tactics make their way, like, you know, IEDs, I think were pretty much unheard of in Afghanistan, you know.
In the early days.
Yeah, like it just were not heard of. But, you know, we obviously shifted resources to deal with Iraq, and so obviously the Taliban were allowed to sort of, you know, we're kind of allowed to regroup, rearm, if you will. So when our sister squadron in Texas went back to start servicing targets from Diego Garcia, you know, we started hearing like, hey man, it's starting to pick up again. Like it's getting busy. And the problem is though, back then, Bones were launching off of DGAR, so Diego Garcia, and I think if this was nuts, you'd take off with a tanker in tow, essentially in tandem. They'd get you out to about 3 hours post-launch. They would give you every single bit of gas they had. They'd go home. So then it was another 2 hours. So it was taking guys about 5 hours just to get to Afghanistan.
Wow, from Diego Garcia.
From DGAR, yeah.
That's wild.
And that's about, if you look at a map, that's about including about 45 to an hour transit of what it was called the Beach Road.
Yeah.
And it's that southern, if you look at the map, you know, Pakistan kind of does that reverse L thing to touch Afghanistan, or I'm sorry, touch Iran. And Afghanistan is just sort of north of this thing called the Beach Road. And it's that desolate, unpopulated part of Pakistan. And that was the one area they let us fly in because no one really cared. And it's like, you know, pay us, give us our aid, you leave us alone, we'll leave you alone. So that was, yeah, I mean, I'm lucky I never had to experience this. But yeah, it was, guys were already airborne for 5 hours before even starting their vol.
That's wild. And just to clarify for people listening, so they're not landing at like CAF or whatever, or Bagram. They are actually like flying from Diego Garcia 5 hours to then prosecute targets.
Yeah.
And then flying back?
Yeah, you're doing we call that a pre-vol tank. You're doing one pre-vol tank. 9 times out of 10, those guys are doing another in-country tank, and then on their way home doing a third.
Wow.
So you're hitting a tanker 3 times, and I think somebody finally started to kind of do the math and go, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The bone is not runway limited at IUD like the B-52 was. And I think at this point now, the Asian games were either happening in 06, 07. So at the time, the CFAC, the 3-star Air Force airman that was, under the CENTCOM commander, at that point, he experimented with, hey, let's see what 2 jets, let's split the squadron up a little bit. And at this time, it was the Texas Squadron, the 9th. And so they had sent, I believe, 2 to 3 jets to the deed to see what the feasibility was. And once they realized, like, hey, we can actually operate out of here, at that point, the decision was made. DGAR is gone. Bones will now be operating out of IUD.
And you're talking IUD Qatar?
Yeah, Qatar, sorry. Yeah,
Yeah. And so how far was that flight then from Qatar to Target?
Yeah, so this was, I'd say to get to Afghanistan, it was probably a solid hour to go directly east. You'd fly over UAE. You'd check in with Muscat Control, which was Oman. Once you did that, maybe 5-10 more minutes, you checked in with Karachi. And then Karachi really just didn't give a shit about you. Like, oh yeah, cool, bone, whatever. Like, we don't care. We hope you die.
Yeah.
We know you hope we die. You don't fuck with us, we won't fuck with you. And then we'd basically go tactical, where we'd put our tactical squawk on. At that point, we'd switch everything off of Victor into uniform, and we were basically talking to other military aircraft for deconfliction. And once you got within range, you were really starting to listen in on JTAC freaks to figure out what was going on in country.
Right.
And then you'd every now and then you'd pass one of the other B1s going in, and you get like a sit rep where the action was, if they had done anything, and then. Yeah, I mean that's kind of how Afghanistan went, I think, for most of my deployments.
So when units were doing like ground force planning, when like operational planning, would they know that you guys would be on station, or would they just plan their op with whatever was in theater, and then you guys would kind of roll in and say, hey, like, we're here. Does anybody need any bombs?
No, I mean I think some of that happened in the early days, like some of the cowboy days.
Yeah.
God, it's killing me. I can't remember the name of this now, but there was a process where the JTACs and the ASOS guys, whether it was Big Army, whether it was the combat controllers with the ODA teams, and I think at this point too, my first deployment, ODA CCTs were still supporting the White SEAL teams. That eventually changed because now they're their own JTACs. But no, you would put in ASR. That's what it was called, Air Service Request. And you would submit an ASR prior to the ATO cycle, and like everything else, the ASOC would rack and stack. What's a high priority mission? What's general? They had their own sort of algorithm, for lack of a better term, on determining who would get what. Obviously, distance and geography played a part. We had the legs to get in some fairly remote parts of the country, so that would play a part as well. But no, it really wasn't. I mean, there was always a plan.
Okay.
Very rarely would we take off without basically a JTAC and a kill box to check into.
Right.
Every now and then there was nothing really to service, so you'd do what's called XCAS.
Yeah.
And the joke was it was extreme CAS, like they'd give us cans of Mountain Dew because it was so extreme.
Right.
Lame joke, but at that point really it was just be in country. God forbid something happens.
Right.
And they would position you. You had to be careful where they positioned you because you didn't want to intrude on somebody else's airspace, but you kind of wanted to be at a jumping off point where hey, Kunduz has been pretty hot lately. Be somewhat around there.
Yeah.
For a long time on one of my deployments, unfortunately after 07 and 08 with, Cop Keating and the other cop that got overrun, we had this thing we had 100% armed overwatch where those guys in the Korangal would have a jet overhead 24/7 period dot.
Yeah.
And then we actually did a lot of that stuff overnight because we had the legs to do it, we had the gas to do it, and so some of those missions were really kind of tedious and tough, but the cool thing about those things was, we talked to JTACs afterwards and say, dudes, I know it sucks. I know you've keyed the mic 6 times total in 6 hours, literally checking in. Okay, cool. 2 hours of nothing. Checking off to go get gas. Okay, cool. See ya. Come back in if you're getting gas. Checking out to get gas again. So there was a few stories where over Korangal, we'd literally key the mic 6 times over 7 hours. And it was like I just described, checking in, checking out, checking in, checking out.
Yeah.
But from what we heard from those guys, it all like the fobs, like that was the only time those guys could actually get some sleep.
Yeah.
Because us just making noise generally was at least enough of a deterrent
Yeah.
for a
Yeah,
lot
yeah,
for
yeah.
guys, for shitheads not to like try to pop something
Yeah.
off. So that actually made us feel good.
Let me take
Please.
a quick segue here. I need to pimp out the podcast and remind people that we have a Patreon, and there's a link down in the description. And if you guys go and subscribe, you'll get access to all these episodes ad-free. Really appreciate you guys supporting the channel. We do some bonus episodes on there, and YouTube doesn't like YouTubers for some reason recently, so we're trying to transition to the Patreon a bit. And thank you everyone who already subscribes. We appreciate it. And if you haven't, it's also free just to subscribe to the YouTube and hit the bell icon so you get notified when we go live. Oh yeah, the Eyes On is our secondary podcast, which is national security current events with Jason Lyons and Andy Milburn. So that's on the same channel. So thank you guys. So Brian, just to back up a little bit, I want to ask you about the quote unquote traditional or the doctrinal role of the B-1 bomber. I mean, that is, I believe it's our only supersonic bomber.
Yes.
It's a very unique aircraft.
Yeah.
Tell us about like what that thing's designed for, what it's designed to do, and then how you guys obviously had to change modalities there to fight a counterinsurgency or a counterterrorism mission.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, the B-1, originally was a program in the late 70s, height of the Cold War. And, the original design of it was, this thing, had a terrain following radar, still does. We just can't execute anymore, unfortunately, to try to extend the life of the aircraft. But, terrain following radar, so basically hands off the jet, could fly at 200 feet, flying curvature of the earth type thing. And the thought process was it was nuclear capable when it was first, designed. And really the mission was 200 feet under early warning radars into Mother Russia, pop up to a safe release altitude, release, the SRAMs or, the nuclear weapons at the time, and, basically pray for the best so you can sort of do an outmaneuver, not get blinded,
Right.
and basically make it home safe.
Right.
That was the original mission. President Carter killed it based on budgetary concerns and some other reasons, and then, Reagan reignited it. So the jet was only produced in 2 years, 85 and 86. So whenever you would step to a jet, the tail number was either going to start with 85 or 86. That was the only 2 years it was built. It was originally designed to have 200. That, of course, got cut down to 100. And then I think at its height, I want to say there was maybe 75 to 80-something jets. So it was kind of a maintenance pig initially. It actually did not play at all in Desert Storm 1. And so,
Really?
yeah,
Wow.
you had a lot of angry sort of, Cold War warrior types that pretty much felt like they got shut out of it. Gulf War I was a really big, B-52 fight from a bomber perspective. And the 117, I think, also made its debut then, too. So really, the Bone really had to kind of search around for a mission for a lot of years. I might be screwing the years up here, but an old wing commander of mine, he retires a 2-star, General Tolliver. He luckily was deployed, I want to say he was deployed to England when Northern Watch and Southern Watch were a thing. In 96, we decided to respond, I think, to some incursions by Saddam. And so the first ever use of the B-1, I believe, was for Southern Watch in 96.
Interesting.
And it's a cool video. This is also back when we had no GPS weapons. Everything was unguided.
Right.
So we were literally releasing, at its height unguided, the B-1 could carry 84 Mark 82s. So 84 500-pound unguided weapons. So that was cool. Kind of like showed that, like, hey, we actually have a place here and we actually have a role. Once the jet finally got GPS guided weapons available to it, this is right around the time of Kosovo, so 99.
Mm-hmm.
It also played in Kosovo with some pretty good success. And so when 9/11 happened, the B-1s were one of the first jets to respond. We sent jets out to DGAR, to some other areas too, which I either can't remember them or I'm not allowed to talk about them, but I mean, they're probably places we've heard of, right?
Yeah.
So, they were one of the early jets to respond. I want to say 9/11 happened, and I've talked to guys that, basically by mid-November, we're dropping weapons in country, supporting 5th Group and the guys up north. So, yeah, basically they just, we adapted to the role that was required. You could argue that there really is no perfect cast platform other than the A-10. And even the A-10, and, most A-10 weapons school grads will tell you, like, that thing was designed to kill tanks in the Fulda Gap during the Cold War. but it's made itself essentially the king of CAS from a doctrinal standpoint. The fact that it can do Type 1, I can see the target, I can see the friendlies, like that thing is amazing.
Yeah.
But, not to sort of paraphrase, Rumsfeld, but, you go to war with the Air Force you had. And
Yeah.
so basically,
Yeah.
our frontline stuff, which was designed for near peer, we all had to sort of figure out how we were going to be an optimal CAS platform.
Right.
And like I said, before, like, we had some pros and cons. We had shitloads of gas, shitloads of weapons, and then really just the issue with us sometimes is we're high. Really can only do Type 2 control CAS,
Right.
meaning I'm never going to see the friendlies. I'm maybe, if I'm lucky, going to see the bad guys.
Yeah.
But a lot of times I'm really kind of releasing on coordinates only. But we definitely had persistence and gas to, stay overhead for 3 to 4 hours at a time and, be that overwatch for guys. So yeah, I would say our role definitely evolved over time to where, we were happy that guys could just execute basic CAS in the beginning to like 3-4 years later, like, we're getting into the nuances of like, do I do this sort of a maneuver after CAS for optimal placement? Like we started trying to get into the finer points of conducting CAS, like the fighters and the rotary guys would.
Could you take us a little bit through like what it's like, sitting there in the hot seat as a weapons guy and how you're putting those, presumably you're the guy that has to put the weapons on target.
So funny story. So 07, we were still radar only. We had no targeting pod.
Oh, wow.
So 07, which was my first deployment, like late 06, 07, we were literally a radar only platform. It was scary. So, which was funny was being at the deed. So being at the deed, even though Iraq at this point was an effing mess, like the early parts of 07, like it eventually led into Petraeus coming in, for this, for the reawakening and him kind of turning the tide against this, with the tribal leader piece that he advocated for. But if you went to Iraq, you knew you weren't dropping unless it was pre-planned because we had no targeting pod and everything there was urban. Afghanistan was a different story, obviously a lot more spread out. Not as much focus as there as we've talked about. Like the fight was Iraq. Afghanistan, I hate to say it at that point, was really more of an afterthought. Like, hey, we went there for good and we kind of took our eye off the ball a little bit. Like that's just my opinion. So I'll give you one story where it's my first combat sortie ever. I'm a little nervous, hadn't really slept that great. So we check in, we go all the way towards Jalalabad, and I'm sitting in the left seat, which is not the weapons seat. And, I kind of tell the other WSO to my right, this guy Otto, and he had been on his 3rd deployment, but because his previous 2 deployments were D-Guard deployments, he never dropped a single weapon either. So we're both like 2 neophytes in the back. So we're checking in with the JTAC. He's not answering, not keying the mic. So we figured like, okay, it's a no-show, no big deal. We'll hang out here. So I kind of go to Otto. I'm like, hey, dude, I really didn't sleep a whole lot, man. Like, I'm going to like wedge my checklist, in my ejection seat and kind of like try to like, homeless sleep it off a little bit. He goes, yeah, dude, all good. I want to say I got about maybe 15-minute power nap and he cracks me in the arm. Like, dude, we got a tick.
Yeah.
And, back then, before McChrystal came in and before we really started kind of really tying up how we went kinetic, I mean, 06, 07, you said the word tick. It was like the 3-star, like legally letting you drop weapons.
Yeah.
We had some situations, I mean, there were definitely some, I think, instances where we probably abused that authority, where guys just dropped the magic word tick, I think I'm threatened, and that was all the excuse you needed to go kinetic.
Yeah.
Empty the bomb bay
Yeah,
door.
pretty much, yeah. We had, I'll tell you
Yeah.
I'll tell you 1 or 2 stories from that, but, so I get punched in the arm. Like, all right, shit, okay, cool. All right, where are we going? And I'm like all jazzed up, and then I realize and I'm at this point now, we're running the math in the back, we're figuring out, okay, if we go 0.9 down to this tick in Helmand province, we'll show up there in about 40 minutes, and we'll still have about 2 hours of playtime. So you get amped up, and then it's like, oh, fuck, like, I'm going from J-Bad down to Helmand.
Right.
It's still 40 minutes.
Right.
But, you get your time to get your act together, get checked in. And I want to say, generally on a uniform freak, we could generally start reaching JTACs at about, if you were lucky, especially if they had an extender on their, I think it was the 172s they were running around with, but around 40 to 50 miles, you can start getting comps to the JTAC. And so my first tick ever, I'll never forget it, Widow 78, and it was a British JTAC assigned to the Royal Fusiliers. And I love working with the Brits because, I'd work later on with Americans, and it's hectic and it's cast. The Brits were the most... They could be in a life-threatening situation. It's like, Baron 3-4, it's Widow 7-8. Sorry to be a bother, sir, but we are taking heavy fire from these. Standby grid. All right, ready. 4-1 Sierra Papa Romeo, and then like, brrr.
Yeah.
And this is back in the days where like, Sangin province, this is, and obviously Helmand and Kandahar were like the spiritual home of the Taliban. And
Yeah.
that's kind of where they made their reawakening. And so the Brits that were there really got into it big time. So those guys were constantly getting into contact, and it flew by. But I kid you not, we stayed with these dudes for about 8 hours.
Yeah.
And at the time, we were carrying a bay tank, 6 GBU-38s in the intermediate bay, which was a 500-pound GPS-guided weapon, and we had 8 31s. And we know shit. We released all 8 2,000-pound weapons.
Wow.
We came this effing close to going Winchester. And I could tell the JTAC was really trying to make it work. Ben, I'm really trying here. We think you're all dead. You've done too good of a job, but I don't think we can get connected with your loss. Thank you so much, gents. Appreciate it. Later. And I blink. I'm like, oh, fuck, dude. We've been airborne for like 7 hours. Like, wow, we've been in this tick for 7 hours.
Yeah.
So that was like that was like my first ever drop. And, all that like regret of like not going fighters, not going Eagles. I'm like, you know what? This is where I was meant to be.
For you guys,
awesome.
do you recall what the danger close was for the 500-pounders and then for the?
It changed. The initial days in 07, an impact GBU-38 was 305 meters. A impact GBU-31 was 365. And then I'll be honest with you, some of my old students, or if they listen to this, are going to be giving me shit for not remembering. If I went airburst on the 38, it bumped it up by 30 meters.
Right. Okay.
And if I went airburst 31, it bumped it out to like 405.
Okay.
Now after that,
For almost 100 extra meters.
yeah, pretty much,
basically.
yeah. So after that, though, they did a lot more research. They started dialing them down. And I want to say my last deployment, the 38s, I remember being 265 for impact, 305 for airburst. And I want to say for some weird reason, 315 and 385, or 315 and 365 for 31s.
Okay.
But that's how I kind of like, obviously the airburst, because the spread would go out on
Right.
the nose cone, that would generally put it out for about 40, 50 meters on top of it.
What was the standard height for an airburst when you guys would drop
So
it?
the DSU-33 was 20 feet plus or minus 6 feet.
Okay.
So it would go anywhere from 14 feet all the way up to 26 feet was the
Okay.
impact point.
That's quite a shredder.
Yeah, we had
When you
one.
think about it,
Well,
yeah,
we had a
yeah.
couple of sorties where I remember one fucker. This was 08, and the call was we dropped the GBU-38 airburst on this guy, and this guy. I really hope this guy lived and went to go cure cancer or something, but it was not too far from Kandahar. They'd caught him planting an IED, and we literally watched this. Our targeting pod screen went poof, like we hit him.
Yeah.
But this guy literally must have survived. They called it like the cone of survival.
Right.
The guy literally was underneath, and all the frag went out.
Yeah.
So this guy actually did one of these in the pod and like sprinted off.
Yeah.
And we couldn't get cleared for a reattack. So yeah, there was a few times there where we really advocated for, unless the guy is offset or unless you want me hitting guys in trees.
Yeah.
We'd actually tell the JTACs over the radio like, hey, copy all. Recommend we go impact, and we'll connect. We'll readjust from there if needed.
And you're saying because with an impact it hits and it goes out. With an
Yeah.
airburst it goes out, which gives you a wider spread.
It does.
But there's actually like directly underneath the cone.
It's the weird, and you wouldn't think it. It's,
Yeah.
Now, granted, there was a few times where talking to guys afterwards, they were like, "That guy probably is going to die the next day, just based on the compression
Yeah.
that he's getting off the bomb."
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I'll send you guys the video. There's one video, the British JTACs in 07 would like. This is before iPhones. These are like the Sony digital cams.
Yeah.
They'd call in strikes from us, and they'd like over cover. And there was one where we dropped a 31. And they were well outside of danger close, but you could hear the guy coughing and hacking because he's talking as the shockwave goes.
Yeah.
And he's like,
Yeah.
they're fucked if they're in there. The guy's like, it's like he's hacking up a lung. So,
Yeah. Yeah, that overpressure must have been immense, even if you didn't catch any.
Yeah,
of
there
that.
was a few guys where it's like you didn't want to get in like an argument with the ground force commander, but it's like, dude, yeah, he's walking, but like that guy's not surviving.
He's not
that guy's
happy.
bleeding from every orifice
Yeah.
he has, and probably some that we just created. Like this guy's not gonna live. But,
Yeah.
no, he's moving. Like, if I fuck it, dude, like,
Yeah.
we'll drop another $70K for the
Yeah.
taxpayer. Like, why not?
Yeah. It reminds me of Major Pain. It's like if he's in there, he ain't happy.
Yeah, that was a big part of it. Yeah.
JDM's for Jesus.
Yeah.
That was that's a good, yeah. But yeah, that was so. I'm kind of getting off on tangents here, but I appreciate
No,
it.
it's perfect. It's great.
So 07 was crazy because right when right before, I'd say about a month before we transitioned out, that's when Petraeus came in and like the floodgates of Iraq just opened. Like I think Petraeus gave a lot of the ground force commanders sort of like license, like, hey dudes, if there's been something you've been meaning to schwack, like now's your time.
Yeah.
So we had one sortie where you could usually hit Basra in about 45 minutes, the southernmost point. The Brits were in control of that. But I remember taking off. We took off to the north, and so like basically we hit Iraq in like record time. And if you look on a map, it was a kill box south of Baghdad. I forget the specific town, but we literally, it was lined up. We were hitting an olive grove that was historically like a, insurgent staging area. And I don't think we changed our heading more than 5 degrees. We just flew straight for 45 minutes, opened the bay doors. We got all 20 weapons off on one pass. Bone 3-4 is Winchester, mission complete. And then, somebody at the TOC is looking at their, like, all right, your Winchester, go home. So, yeah, I went Winchester in like under 4 hours after dropping 20 weapons. And that was just like the betray, like that like month, I think our bomb total, like we were on track maybe to drop like 500 over the course of 6 months. And I think by the time we left in July of 07, we were up to like 7 and change.
Wow.
And that was just, Afghanistan was still hot, obviously. The spring fighting season was in full force at that point. And then, yeah, Iraq just being there for the beginning of the awakening, I forget what the terminology was when Petraeus showed up. That was a huge game changer. So got home, went back out the next year. I actually went a little bit late because I went to instructor school. But that second deployment, we actually had the sniper targeting pod. And everyone had warned us, like, dudes, you're going to drop less with this thing, mark my words. Like, no way, man. Like, do you know how many targets I could have found if I had a pod? Like, all right, shithead. Okay, fine. You know better. They were right. We had the targeting pod that second deployment. I think our drop went down to like 385.
Why is that?
I mean, a lot of that point now, it's the onus is really on the air crew. And for them, whatever possible, like it probably should be, right? Like you're a tool for the guy on the ground. The biggest thing, at least I would say from the B1's perspective, was most guys got it that like, dude, I don't care if we fly a $300 million jet, like the mission is the guy on the ground.
Sure.
Like
is there like a quantity over quality kind of aspect or vice versa that the sniper pod made you more accurate? I mean,
that was definitely a part of it.
Okay.
It was also, I think, I don't want to go back and look and say maybe some of the bombs we dropped in 07 maybe were overkill or there was really nothing there.
But you were also working with what you had at the time.
Yeah, but yeah, the sniper pod definitely like you could not. Some guys got into trouble because you could not definitively tell like what a dot was, right?
Sure.
And if you looked at the John Chapman Medal of Honor MQ1 video, right? Like that is about as grainy as it effing gets.
Yeah.
The Lockheed sniper pod was 10 times better,
Yeah.
but I still couldn't discern, child from man,
Right.
woman from man. All I could basically tell is I've got movement, and if I really was starting to stretch the limits here, I have a possible, like, there were certain cases where if your clarity was good enough, I could see like a shorter blip and an adult-sized blip.
Right.
And you'd, hey, dude, I'm not saying definitively, but I've got some half-size returns with some full-size returns.
Right.
And it really was up to the guy on the ground to sort of make that judgment call.
Right.
But, pretty much we were there as a sensor and we were there as a tool for them.
But for a tick, I mean, with this sniper pod, especially if the enemies were, and for people who might not know tick, when we say tick, we're talking about troops in contact. So ground force, engagement.
And usually, like when they call in a tick, it's more than just like a squirter or like
Right.
somebody shooting pop shots. It's like you're effectively engaged by enemy.
Right,
fire.
right. So what, not only from your level, but also from the Air Force level, with these sniper pods coming online, what would happen if there were discrepancy between what the JTAC was saying and what you were seeing on the sniper pod?
I mean, really, you just, guys got into trouble when they sort of thought they were doing leading comm, almost like being like a jailhouse lawyer. You really, and that's the thing too, like everything's getting recorded.
Right.
So we would tell our young guys, like, dude, like you're not there on the ground. I know that you think you can discern that it's Osama bin Laden underneath your crosshairs, but it's probably not.
Right.
So just effing tell the guy what you see.
Right.
And don't bullshit. Don't, because listen, the other thing too is like there were times where, guys were using Rover and, forgive me for forgetting the acronym, but, Rover was the link. I think it was remote operated video enhancement something radio. That's what it was. And Rover was the JTAC's ability to see what my sniper was seeing.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I
And
remember that.
And there were
yeah.
times where
They used it with drones too.
Yeah, they were drones. If you had like the raid cams on a base where,
Yeah.
And some of the pictures from those things were like, it was like HD. It was amazing.
Yeah.
But there were times where like guys were convinced that they were staring at the same thing and they weren't.
Yeah.
Because I mean, let's be honest. Like every mud hut looks pretty effing similar.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Most guys are wearing the same style of man jammy, right? There's like 2 man jammy producers in all Afghanistan. You know, like
Yeah.
it's either Calvin Klein or this other guy. So
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
there were a lot of times where you really got yourself into trouble if you talked yourself. I mean, and I get it. Like you're sitting in a jet, you're moving at a mile a minute. You want to keep the guy safe because you'll hear incoming, you'll hear contact on the radio.
Yeah.
But when you're on the ground and you're the instructor and you're watching their sniper pod, you're like, ah, shit, I know where. Like at ground speed 0, you could see where guys from a comms perspective would talk themselves onto like the wrong targets.
Yeah.
So the thing we would tell guys is just, dude, it doesn't have to be sexy. I don't care if the comm sounds like garbage. Just tell the guy what you see.
Yeah.
And then, it sucks in a lot of ways, but if there's any doubt, there is no doubt.
Right.
Because I mean, this is kind of hard for us, but so 2014 is a perfect example of. I can't go into a lot of it, obviously, because a lot of it's still, I think, classified. But the frat we had, unfortunately, the B-1 on the 5th group guys. I've listened to some of those tapes, and it was. I'll just say that there was definitely. I'll kind of dance around a little bit. There were a few comments to the tune of like, I'm either gonna get a fucking weapon out of you guys, or I'll find somebody who will give me. It was kind of like, dude, we're taking fire, and I think unfortunately, we sort of let. And I know personally some of the guys in that jet, so I don't want to say much more of it, but like that's an example, I think, of kind of getting browbeaten and doing something normally you wouldn't do at ground speed 0.
Yeah.
So really, that's how we would try to keep guys out of trouble.
Which incident are we talking about?
So 2014, and actually,
Kunduz?
nah, it might have been, but it was the one where they interviewed he ended up going to Georgetown Law School. The captain of the 5th group they did a CBS report.
Well,
on
I
it.
mean, you're saying 2014.
Yeah.
The 5th group. I'm thinking Jason Amarine and the
You're thinking like the B-52 one.
early on in the war.
You're thinking 02 where
Yeah,
the guy
yeah.
reset his radio.
Yeah, 2014.
There was a 2014.
There was. Okay.
It was, yeah. If you go back and look.
Do me a favor.
Sorry.
Pick up. Just point it right at the chin.
My bad.
Just spin it around.
Like this.
You're all good.
Okay. I'll put it up higher. Is that better? Yeah. All right, cool. Yeah, summer of 2014, unfortunately, we had a blue on blue, and it was basically dismounts, guys got separated, and essentially we're firing on each other, didn't know it, and then a bone showed up and responded, and unfortunately, I think we lost 4 guys. That's just like one example, I think, of
What country was this in?
Afghanistan.
Oh, okay.
But what sucked about, I mean, again, my personal opinion, not official Air Force position, but what ended up happening was CBS did a special on it, and if you read the CBS special, it's B-1s with targeting pods are unsafe, and it's like, dude, there were some fuck ups. Don't get me wrong, but like there were fuck ups all around, and that's kind of one of those things where, as an aircrew guy, you don't feel right sometimes passing judgment on a guy getting shot out on the ground, but it's also like, dude, like
Similar
there's
to
procedures everywhere.
Sure.
when I was thinking about Kunduz, I mean that's where the Doctors Without Borders hospital was hit.
Oh, that's another one.
There was a number of different things that like led up to that, and it becomes like the perfect storm.
So it's funny, yeah, and that's the comment for guys who've listened to that tape that I do the after action report. Obviously, I remember talking to a couple of 5th group guys because for a while there, like a lot of B-1 guys, like if you were around, like you kind of didn't let 5th group dudes know that you were a bone dude because it was definitely a touchy subject. But I met 1 or 2 5th group guys that just kind of like, hey, dude, hey, listen, you guys. The one guy actually kind of made us feel a little better. He goes, I've got 2 personal stories where you guys have saved my ass, and he goes, it sucks. It wasn't just you. If CBS kind of threw us under the bus a little bit, but it was literally like you said, cascading events.
Yeah.
And it's happened in the past where like that was kind of one of the benefits for a long time of us being a 4-person jet. Like one guy could cry uncle and go, whoa, dude, something's not sounding right here.
Right.
And you'd reassess, go, fuck, dude, like I miscarried the one, I
Yeah.
had the wrong grid identifier, whatever. That was just unfortunately one of those stories where like the moon's all aligned in the wrong spot.
Yeah.
It's horrible. Guys feel terrible about it, but it was just the nature of the war.
But it's unfortunate because that sort of fog of war, like it happens on the ground between blue on blue also. So
Yeah.
it's not, it's not as if it's something that is solely limited to B-1s with sniper pods.
And that was the funniest thing about it was like dude, it's the exact same sniper pod on every other CAF platform.
Right.
So like the fact that they were trying to tie it to us, it's like the micron, like the physics of the pod don't change on a fighter.
Right.
It's still the same micron range and IR. Like so
Right.
that was kind of where a lot of us cried BS.
Yeah.
But it kind of gave us a black eye for a little bit, unfortunately. And for a lot of us, again, just my personal opinion, I think it felt like the Air Force is doing everything in their power to justify getting rid of the bone.
Yeah.
Because we're not nuke anymore.
Yeah.
It really had no problem, I think, running us into the ground simply to make, slides look green for cast coverage.
Right.
But, yeah.
And it's wild because, you're talking about the Air Force trying to get rid of the B-1. Meanwhile, we know that, they've tried since Vietnam to get rid of the A-10. They've tried since Vietnam to get rid of the AC-130.
Yeah.
Like, and these platforms come out and prove to be incredibly viable and important platforms in these wars. And yet, even after these wars, the Air Force is still determined to get rid of them. It's like they have the next greatest and best thing.
I think, luckily, at least the rumor that I've heard is, again, this is just open source, but I think the B-1 is going to probably get a little bit of a stay of execution.
Mm-hmm.
If you guys saw, I'll give him a shout out, but my old squadron, unfortunately, we lost our 3 with the drone at Antaf Garrison. Well, the bone is what responded again, and one of my old students texted me to give me grief, like, "Hey, dude, I broke your record. Like, the Libya crew had the record for combat sortie from CONUS. Yeah, we just killed it. Like, eat a dick. Like, thank you, a young wise one. I've taught you well. But yeah, we continue to prove that, like, right when you think like the old way of doing war is done, it's like the old Godfather thing. Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in.
Yeah.
Like, we just cannot extricate ourselves from an effing theater. It seems like.
Yeah.
And I also think too, like, just from a sheer number standpoint, God forbid something kicks off the Pacific, like it just becomes a number. It literally becomes just basic math, i.e.,
Right.
I've got X number of combat B-52s. They've got X number of weapon station. I've got X number of bones, X number of B-2s, and then you literally just start doing the math of available weapon station per bomber.
How many platforms with
Yeah.
what fuel range that can actually reach out?
Exactly.
I want to get back to sort of your story,
Yeah.
but since you brought it up, can you tell us? Can we talk about the other sort of bomber platforms and what they're like? What advantages they have, and why the B-1, was thought to be outdated, but then proven to be valuable.
Obviously the B-52, which again, there's sort of like a bomber rivalry syndrome, if you will. And I know I just missaid that word, but the thing is a marvel of aircraft engineering. That thing possibly will fly for 100 years. I'd say the edge it has over us right now is it can fly higher. I don't know if this is an advantage per se, because I want no part of the nuke mission ever, but it is nuclear capable. It has the ability to carry heavier weapons than we do. As of right now, the heaviest weapon the B-1 can carry is in the 2,000-pound class. B-52s can carry 5,000-pound class weapons. The problem right now is in a near-peer fight, they'll probably never get close enough to actually drop a 5,000-pound weapon, but it has that ability. So the B-52 is definitely very highly versatile and capable. It's just really, really old, and it's also speed limited. Like our standard employment speed generally is 0.85 Mach, which roughly translates into about 510 true. I want to say the B-52s are 0.83, and I mean, but 0.83 is like their no shit limit. Like I've employed the jet in combat up to 0.9 because our door, and we could go faster. The only issue in the B-1 is past 0.9 Mach, the bay doors, it's a speed restriction on the bay doors. But I mean, we have the ability to drop weapons and get the F out of Dodge quick. Buffs kind of sort of not so much. They have some speed limitations, but they can fly higher. So they definitely can release all their weapons instantaneously. There's some limitations with us doing that. So that's kind of like, I'd say, modern day stuff with the B-52 in a nutshell. The B-2, think of it right now until the B-21 comes online, the B-2 is literally like our 911. Like, there's under 20 now, unfortunately. It's stealth. Obviously, it's stealth, but like we're talking late 80s, 90s technology.
Right.
It's starting to become less and less stealth, unfortunately.
Right.
It's not modular in the sense of I can update LRUs and update parts of the aircraft quickly, because it's, again, thing was designed in the 80s and the 90s. But again, that thing was built to be able to be launched from the States, hit a target anywhere in the world, and come back safely.
Yeah.
So, and it's also nuclear capable. So
Yeah.
I've had a few friends of mine that have transitioned from the B1 to the B2.
Okay.
So that's I think sort of like probably like the macro 30,000 foot view on the big difference between us.
Yeah.
You know, and I'd say if you're going to compare us to them, depending on the weapon type, if it's a 500-pound smart weapon, the B2's got us killed. We can only drop about 15 of those. But from some weird bay limitations, some rack limitations, we can somehow drop 24 2,000-pounders, which makes no sense.
Yeah.
You can drop more heavier than less heavier.
Yeah.
That makes no sense.
Yeah.
And obviously, at least in my personal opinion, we can integrate with a package and fighters a lot more easily because we're a little bit more dynamic, we're a little bit more maneuverable, and again, the speed piece is not there as well.
Yeah.
We don't have the speed limitation the B-52 does. So,
Yeah.
and yeah, I mean, right now, you've got to keep a certain number of B2s on the line at the ready for anything. B-52s right now are going through a major upgrade, a major overhaul. So I'd say B1s right now are kind of back to being like that, like, you know, that 911 response force. We got to respond to something within, you know, pick a time frame. Kind of like what we just saw with Syria and Iraq like about a month ago.
Yeah.
What do you think I mean, a lot of it's probably public, I imagine. I mean, but what do you think the future is of bombers in the U.S. Air Force? What is the, you know, like right now we're transitioning to the F-35 for fighters, and there's going to be another like joint fighter that comes out. What do you see the future looking like for bombs?
I mean, I think right now it's pretty open source, but I mean, now this keeps changing, but probably up until a few months ago, the game plan was, you know, we were going to start sunsetting B1s to then start making room for B21s, and then the B2 was next to go. So in a crazy turn of events, literally our bomber force on paper by the year 2035, 2040 is going to literally be B21s and B-52s. Like our oldest bomber and our newest bomber.
Yeah.
And the two little middle children, if you will, the B2 and the B1 are pretty much getting sunsetted.
Yeah.
Now I think, now in an amazing accomplishment, the B-21 actually flew on time, on scheduled. It looks a lot, the B-21 looks very, very similar to the B2, but it's on YouTube. Like the B-21 actually flew. It won't be mission capable, I think, until the end of the decade or so. Don't want to put an exact date on it, but yeah, as of right now, per the Air Force, I mean, your future bomber force is literally the B-52 and the B-21. But like I said, I think, you know, the B-1 might be around for the 10 years now, based on recent events.
But right now, there's no scheduled like intermediate step between the two.
No, that's it. You know, like we went all in on the B-21. I think the difference with the B-21 versus everything else, and even the F-35, is it's designed to be modular. Like it's designed to sort of be a lot more software and digital capabilities. So as threats update, as things update, like the thought process is I can pull something out, swap it back in, no worries.
Yeah.
That's really a challenge for some of the jets we have now, just because based on their, you know, when they were built and some of the parts and stuff. So, but yeah, as of right now, that is your future bomber force.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, back to your personal experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no worries.
Yeah. Out of curiosity, as a WSO, you know, you said it on the B1, you've got two. You know, it's one thing when you're the only game in town, but when you're on a really hot op and there are multiple stacks of air,
Yeah.
how are you managing that?
I mean, so funny story is generally in a lot of those instances, the jet that's got the most weapons and essentially is prosecuting the targets is the mission commander.
Okay.
So the B1 actually on a lot of ops, on multiple strike ops, is actually the mission commander. So it's really his job to actually run the show, which is kind of funny because, and a lot of times based on our lack of link connectivity or, you know, sort of where we are in the stack, you could argue we had the least SA sometimes of everything else,
Right.
but it's still, you know, don't care, fix it per doctrine, like that's your job.
Right.
Really at that point, it ends up, you know, the joke sometimes when you have things like weapon school events and red flag events, it's really called deconfliction flag because, you know, like prosecuting the targets and surviving is almost second to just safely managing your stack of aircraft.
Don't drop a bomb on a plane. On
on
an
like
A-10 flying
don't
underneath
drop
you.
through someone's altitude.
Yeah.
Don't get out of your block. Like, you know, that's that. Yeah, really, it becomes like, honestly, at that point, it's literally the mission is either going to be accessed or not before you even step to the jet. Like, if you mission planned good, and you mission planned safely, and you know, the challenge sometimes at Bones was, you know, we're at the deed, and we're having a mission plan, say with you know, F-22s and Strike Eagles at Al Dhafra, you know, F-16s up north. You know, it wasn't really a huge issue in Afghanistan, that thing you just described really became an issue, I would say, during ISIS, because there were multiple times where, ISIS went back to feeling like, okay, now we're actually training like it's not, I wouldn't say near peer, but we're doing things that we have never done in the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll kind of skip through some of the next. So '08 deployed, first targeting pod 1, great. Did not deploy weirdly enough because that was our full year off in between deployments in '09. And then when we back out in 2010, that was the birth of the whole quote unquote tactical directive. And that was when McChrystal was COM ISAF and basically commander of all force Afghanistan. And that was, we went from like, if guys were under fire taking rounds, it's like, okay, dude, just tell me where, and you're getting around.
Yeah.
The tactical directive was literally, you will not go kinetic unless, we're going to lose dudes. You can guarantee that there are no civilians anywhere in the vicinity, or you cannot disengage.
Yeah.
So it was the first time ever in my life where you're watching indirect, you're seeing the dude shoot.
Yeah.
But because they were near a structure and we could not verify whether or not that structure was completely clear of civilians, which we know in a lot of cases they were filled with civilians on purpose, like chained up.
Yeah.
I mean, it was eerie. Like there was like our weapons release like grinded to a halt, that deployment. I did drop once in 2010 before I got lucky. I got selected to go to the Air Force version of Top Gun is called Air Force Weapons School. And I found out halfway through my 2010 deployment that I got selected to go. But it was really cool was we would, Baltimore Gob became really, really hot like 09, 2010 timeframe. I remember there was a few ticks where we'd go up there. I'll never forget this. Prankster was the 82nd Airborne JTAC. We'd check in with him. We'd try to get clearance to drop, and it's like, yeah, Bone, ground commander, we're not meeting intent. Then, and this is all in the same kill box, I kid you not.
So wild.
So it's like our kill box, you guys would sort of usually operate by, district centers, villages, provinces. Aircrew for a lot of time just thought kill boxes.
Yeah.
So Baltimore Gob was way up in the northwest. I think it was the Turkmenistan border. And there was one sortie where Prankster, Prankster was essentially like the large division force on the ground is saying, no dice, dude, like ground force commander's not approving. We had a Jaguar call sign get on who's combat controller, is attached to an ODA. He's like, yeah, Bone, stand by. We're working it, but I think, and at this point now, going kinetic was such a freaking, I think at that point, it went all the way up to like the 06 SOTIF, dude, for that region, right?
Yeah.
And I'll never forget it. Like as Jaguar is off on VOSIP or, Merc chat trying to find somebody, literally the MARSOC dude hops on like, Bone, yeah, we're good. Stay by that line. We'll fucking kill it. So Halo was the MARSOC call sign, and that was crazy. It was like, my dad says no, and my dad says no, and my dad's cool as shit. My dad says yes, so go ahead and ended up only being a warning shot, but at least it stopped the indirect.
Yeah.
So that was one. Actually, I lied. I dropped twice, and then my last sortie before I went home, again it was Halo, who was a MARSOC team. So they were taking an indirect, and we had a pretty shitty cloud cover, but we recommended we drop 3 by GBU-31s in a triangle pattern. We call it the triangle of death, but basically we would look like a triangle, but they were coming down.
Yeah.
And so, unfortunately, one of them ended up dudding, but 4,000 pounds of ordnance going off essentially did the trick.
Yeah.
And what was really cool was, so I leave, I go through Air Force Weapons School, I come home, and it's March of 2011 now, and we were setting up for, because our biggest problem at times was a lot of these, mostly it was the soft guys, and, working with JSOC was almost foreign to us because we just never got called to those things. But we really started trying to lean into getting guys up to South Dakota to work hand in hand with us to know how we operate, weird way of doing things. And so we spent a month organizing an East Coast MSOT team to come up to Ellsworth.
Yeah.
So it's the week before they're supposed to come up, and then Libya kicks off. And so we're thinking all right, we had no idea we were going to play in Libya. And so at the time, he was the wing commander about a year ago. I think he'll probably be a general someday. But this guy's Scab. They decided hey, we're going to play a joke on Sloth, who's me. So it's Paddy's Day. I'm obviously Irish, and I'm inviting in the holiday of my people. And so I'm at a party, and I guess the game plan was everyone's in on it, but they're like, hey, dude, when Sloth is really effing like housed. I want you to text me. So I'm like, shit faced. I'm playing, the Pogues, and I'm trying to like run the DJ set. Nobody wants to listen to Irish music, but like I'm forcing them to.
Right.
And next, like, hey, dude, Sloth, you got a call, dude. I'm like, oh yeah, what's up? I'm okay. Who's this? And it's, at the time he was our wing weapons officer. I was like, hey, dude, it's go time, bro. Like we're going to Libya. I'm like, fuck. Oh, shit. And I'm like, and the whole crowd's like, oh really? Oh, we're going to? Yeah, all right. That's it. All right. I decided to turn my buddy's bedroom into like a mobile skiff. Like, all right, you're allowed in, you're not allowed in. All right, we're gonna all right, here's the deal. We're going to Libya. I need somebody to drive me to bait, and they let me ramble on for like 15 minutes.
That's funny.
And next, finally one just goes, ha ha, asshole, you're not going to Libya. So that's a Saturday. Okay, well, joke's on me.
Yeah.
Everyone had their laugh. And then no shit, that next Friday, the joke's on him, because sure enough, we get called to
You
the
get split
skiff,
up.
and we're going to Libya.
Were you like, stop fucking with me, dude? Like, get the fuck out of
Well,
here.
we kind of thought that, but then when they were like, no, dude, you got to go up to the skiff up at wing headquarters, like, oh, I guess this is happening.
Yeah.
So we walk in and like, yeah, dude, they're requesting, we've got a weapons bunker. Air Force is saying no more B-2 sorties, like, we got to go. So, that was a pretty wild, I'll send you guys the pictures of it, but, and I've done interviews on this thing, and, literally our maintenance dudes in like sub-freezing weather genned up 5 green jets and like got 4 airborne. And we basically took off in like 0-0 weather.
Out of
Wow.
South Dakota.
Yeah. And so the way that works is basically what happens is you take off, every green jet available takes off, and then the game plan is the 2 greenish jets, by the time you get off the coast of Newfoundland, those guys take gas from the tankers, and those guys, the ones who cross the pond and are going to go execute the mission.
Yeah.
So we got 4 jets to the coast. This could be an entire separate podcast, this effing thing, but like, so we, my jet and a buddy's jet, we luckily, all our weapons were green, both sniper pods worked, good to go. So we take on all our gas, and at that point now it's about another 4 or 5 hours over to off the coast of England, and then at Mildenhall they've got KC-135s. Those guys come out and meet us.
Yeah.
So now we're coming down, we're going through Gibraltar, we're hanging out in the Med, and this is like when Odyssey Dawn's in full bloom. Like there's a carrier strike group there, guys are launching from Aviano, like it's pretty busy, and every NATO country is playing. So we find out when we check in, hey dude, there's a change to your targets. You're gonna hit new targets in that same area. Oh, but by the way, the Brits have already launched weapons at them, so they're kind of aware now. I'm like, oh, this is really tactically fucking brilliant.
Yeah.
All right, well, say we're ready for your targets, and then we figure out we have the wrong crypto.
Oh.
So I was telling you guys offline,
God.
we got 18 dimpies right off to us in the red. And I said to this day, I said, like, had anyone been listening in, anyone somewhat competent, like, we probably won't be here.
Yeah.
So anyway, we get our new dimpies, we go feet dry, and we actually have two growlers, 2 E-18s, which were, so, as a backstory, the Marines and the Navy both flew prowlers. The Navy retired prowlers and now fly basically an electronic warfare version of the Super Hornet.
Yeah.
Badass aircraft.
Yeah.
It's basically a Hornet that jams. It's
Yeah.
awesome. And it's the first time they've ever done embedded combat with a bomber platform.
Yeah.
And so we're, it's basically a 4-ship going line abreast into the southernmost part of Libya. And what was crazy was we thought we had planned everything correctly. And right as we're about to basically go execute, these dudes launch their harms. And it's like, hey, Bones, sorry, dude, we're bingo, later. And we're like, what? So we end up going down into Sebha. We're hitting an ammo dump. And, we looked outside, and AAA's coming up, but luckily it was pretty low millimeters, so it's only topping out at like 15, 16,000. We were above that. But they did launch, just based on noise and activity, they did launch a 3 ballistically at us because one of the pilots saw it. So we do all that, pretty successful. Both jets go off Winchester, no big deal. We land. Heroes welcome at the deed. It's awesome. And I'm thinking like, oh, this is cool, man. Like, it's like late March. Chill here. We'll get my 3 beers a day.
Yeah.
We'll roll into April, get another month of tax-free. And they're like, yeah, no, dude, you're going back tomorrow. You're gonna
Back
basically
to the States?
No, you're going back to Libya again.
Okay.
You're basically going to do a drive-by. We think we know where Gaddafi's son is.
Yeah.
So that sortie on the way back was a little hairy because did not go as planned. We thought a 5 was launching at us. We had weapons faults like that. We had to actually earn our paycheck that sortie, but
Yeah.
that one was pretty crazy as well. So we get back, and I basically laughed at the guy who tried to put the joke on me, like, hey, hey, dude, like, joke's on you. I actually did go to Libya.
Yeah.
So then we end up going to a normal Afghan sortie that summer.
Yeah.
That one again was fairly, I'd say the one two things out of the ordinary, and that's on that deployment happened to me. One was, they had told us for years, like, hey, dude, be ready, man. Like, Somalia can happen at any time. And like when you're a young guy, you're like, oh yeah, dude, you're amped up. You're studying the airspace.
Yeah.
By the third or fourth time, you're like, dude, I'm done getting cock teased about Somalia. I'm not going. Quit teasing me, or Yemen or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So I'd done a pretty late night, and I'm in bed, and we're getting a pounding on the door, and it's like, no, dude, we have to go. We actually think this is happening now.
Yeah.
And so we walk into the mission room, and if you guys remember, once Bin Laden got killed, Anwar al-Awlaki, who was the Yemeni, he was American-born, but he was a Yemeni cleric. He's the guy that actually radicalized the underwear bomber, the Christmas bomber of '09. Well, they had a beat on him. And what was crazy was they had actually parked a Marine LCS off the coast of Yemen simply for the purposes of killing this dude. And weird, whatever agency was tracking him, just the moons aligned. The day that they had a beat on him, this Marine LCS squadron was down for maintenance, so we got launched out of the deed. And it was a huge cock tease because they could never get a beat on him, but like the fact that I got woken up out of bed at that point to go target the POTUS's #1 objective was really effing cool.
Yeah.
They gave us extra go pills that day because we might be airborne for 30 hours, so that was kind of fun. But so that happened on that deployment, and then unfortunately also this was really eerie. We're on a mission north of Bath, pretty quiet, nothing's happening, but it's August, and I don't want to get the date wrong because it's a pretty bad date, but so usually what happens is, you'll check out the J tag. Hey, dude, sorry it was quiet tonight, but no work, man. Thanks for the help. Appreciate it. Yep, Bone 3-4. You guys stay safe. Switching freaks. Cool. So you check in with essentially like the combat version of the FAA or ATC, really. So it's it's either at the time it was either an Air Force or a Marine ground control unit. But so we're clear 235 back south, and at that point now, like the sortie's over. Even though you're still in country, tactically you're done. So you start kind of doing admin work. We're typing up our missive on the laptop. Guys are stretching, figuring out which movie we're gonna play on the way home. Guys are breaking out like food, whatever. And next, we start getting screamed at over guard, like Bone 3-4, avert, avert, avert. So we get the fuck out of Dodge. And we're like, what's happening? And we find out like you guys just flew through a hot ROS, restricted operating zone. And we're like, yeah, dude, Bone 3-4, we'll check the tapes on landing, but like we got cleared here, dude. Like, my bad, no harm, no foul. So when we land, unfortunately, I find out that it's Extortion 17 that we just blew.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I remember at the time, the guy, it was a team based in the east, so I won't say which base it was at, but when I landed, one of the team leaders called me screaming at me, like basically like the gist of it I got was that they either had a beat on the RPG team or they thought they had a beat on, but either way, like in his mind, us blowing through his ROS had really fucked something up. And so I'm sitting there, he's a 04, I'm an 03, and I'm like, sir, I'm so sorry. I don't know what's happened, but like we'll look at our tapes. I swear to God, like we were cleared. And not to knock the JSOC guys, but those guys were notorious for doing pop-up ROSs and not telling the rest of the big fight, if you will. And I get why. They were generally taking down HVI's objective names.
Right.
And so
but they're kind of, I bequeath you restricted airspace, but not telling anybody else.
That was some units were different than others.
Yeah.
This one in particular, I guess, I'd never had an issue with before, but so it's kind of one of those like historical things I did not want to be like airborne for, but I was.
Sure.
So that deployment wrapped up. At that point, I was actually selected to go back and teach at weapons school. Sequestration, as you remember, happened in 2013. They shut down weapons school. I went and did a ground job up in Kabul, up at the airport, which was kind of eerie. When we saw the pullout, I'm seeing videos of like the Thai restaurant on Twitter and the airport. I'm like, oh shit, we ate there.
Yeah.
Like, oh shit, we took a rocket attack there. So I'm kind of fast forwarding, and so at this point now, like I'm a New Yorker, I'm living in West Texas, and I'm kind of like starting to like, okay, you know what, the cool factor of flying the B-1 is not really compensating for me not being happy socially.
Right.
And so I was kind of ready to like, jump ship, go to the Guard. There's a rescue unit out in Long Island, the 106, the PJ unit and the HC-130 unit. I was pretty convinced I was going to jump ship to that unit, and they basically said, dude, just give it one more shot. We're going to try and get you back to the East Coast. Just stick with us, dude. We're working for you. And so luckily we did. I did, and then I ended up volunteering off cycle for a deployment right after the ground one, and this was like early 2014, and so the news wasn't really picking up a lot of the activity in the Middle East yet. Like Afghanistan was cured, right? That's on the downslope. Iraq was Iraq, and so I'm thinking like, I'll get out to the deed. I'll fly once a week. I'll be a wing weapons officer. I'll study for my GMAT and my GRE. And if I don't have an assignment waiting for me when I come home, fuck it. I'll come here. I'll try to get into a grad school here. I'll work part-time. I'll do the guard thing, whatever. I'll never forget. It's the summer, and my buddy is like, yeah, dude, you might be a little busier than planned. Things are starting to ramp up here. And I said, okay. And then that's when finally the news started picking it up. Unfortunately, when the journalist James Foley got beheaded, Sinjar Mountain happened with the Yazidis. And so, I got out there 2 weeks after OIR and Inherent Resolve officially kicked off. And so, I'll kind of back to the whole thing, like things happen for a reason. I'm getting ready to launch on my first sortie, and I go and check my email, and it's like, hey, congrats, you've been selected for an air staff assignment at the Pentagon. And I'm like, oh, dude, like, guys are high-fiving me, like, this is great. So then now it's my first ISIS sortie. So the way this one works is 45 minutes north of Basra, about another maybe hour to get like northwest of Mosul. And at this time, we had a tanker track literally right inside the Iraqi border. You do a pre-vol tank, and then you pretty much press in. And I'd say for the first 3 months, all we were doing was Kobani. Because Kobani, if you remember, was...
Syria.
Yeah. And this is why, the Kurds to this day are the bravest, most amazing people we've ever supported. Why we keep effing them over is beyond me. But so Kobani was that one area where it's like, everyone is fleeing Syria, everyone's fleeing ISIS's wake, and the Kurds were like, come at me, bro. Like, we're not leaving.
Yeah.
Like, they got the women and kids out, but like the Kobani, the Kurds that were of fighting age and even their women, they stayed.
Yeah.
And it was essentially like trench warfare. Like
Yeah.
they were fighting block to block to block. So my first sortie there, I remember.
I've actually, now that you mention this, I've actually seen footage shot by some of the fighters in Kobani, the Kurds and some of the foreigners that were there with them. Not military, like people who volunteered crazy enough to go and do that.
Yeah.
But I mean, it is fucking insane to see like airstrikes like 500 feet in front of them, buildings just being demolished.
I'll give you a comparison story real quick after this one. But like so, and as I described before, right? I'm used to like Afghan casts.
Right.
Bone 3-4 contact on 2x movers, in this vicinity, copy Bone 3-4 monitor, and you'd track a guy for a while, see if anything nefarious, right? That could sometimes turn into an hour, sometimes 2.
Yeah.
Happy to do it. I will never forget, we rip out a 2-ship of Vipers, we do a swap, they do a target handoff into like this area, and it's like, hey, dude, we saw activity in this block. So we're searching, and then I was the new guy, so I sat the left seat, not the bomb seat. But I'm running the radio, and this Syria was actually back to the defensive guy there is no longer there just to support the O.
Yeah.
Like, dude, we're actually, Syrian Air Force is still active.
Yeah.
The Turks, our friends, every now and then to fuck with us would light us up just because they could.
Right.
Because we're helping the people they hate.
Right.
And they still had an active 3. Every now and then the 5, the SA-5 would go on. So like, you actually had to be a DSO.
Yeah.
Because Syria could pop off at any moment. But, and apparently it was even completely different when the Russians showed up, even worse. But, so it's funny, like, I'm being the D and I'm watching, and I'm taking the radio for the guy because it was weapons heavy. I'll never forget it, talking to the JTAC, and it's like, hey, Bone 3-4 contact 2x packs in vicinity 37 Sierra Delta Alpha. And before I even got the ending grid out, oh, Bone 3-4, they're there? Cool, stand by 9 line. And I'm just like, what? What? Like, we're not going to follow these guys for 4 hours? And, and everyone else in the jet's like, dude, shut up. It's go time.
Yeah.
Like, it was literally like, at that point, Phase Line Broadway, I think, was the name of the road. If you look at a map of Kobani, there was like this northeast to southwest running like major highway / major road, and it was called Phase Line Broadway. And for a while, if you were southeast of Phase Line Broadway, you were bad.
Right.
Because you were most likely coming off the main road leading from Raqqa.
Right.
Because that was like their St. Petersburg for ISIS. Like, oh, you're a new guy. Welcome to welcome to our new heavenly state. Get the fuck up to Kobani and do your
die.
job.
Yeah.
And please come die.
Yeah.
Thank you. And yeah, that was that shift of, no, dude, this is like no questions asked. Like, there is no tactical directive. There's no coin here. Like, if they are on this grid,
Right.
they effing die.
Right.
And for context, you asked before, right, about the danger close.
Yeah.
Now, granted, a lot of this is also because every building in Kobani just seemed to be created with reinforced concrete. Because sure enough, I found out on another deployment, a future deployment, there was literally a cement factory in the town south of Kobani.
LaFranche Cement.
LCF.
Yeah,
So there was the two landing zones, right? There was KLZ, which was Kobani landing zone after we, cleared it, and then LCF.
Yeah, LCF became one of our big bases in the
Yeah,
in the
exactly.
region.
I never made it to LCF. I made it to KLZ once, but the craziest 9-line I ever got was it was like watching a street fight. It was two small buildings with not thatched roofs, but like short roofs, and we were watching the YPG, the People's Protection Unit, the Kurd organization. You're watching the YPG and ISIS trade shots, and the 9-line comes in, and it's literally line 1 through 3 NA, line 4 elevation was pretty low in that area. Line 6, the grid line started with 37 Sierra to the Alpha. No shit, line 8 west 40 meters, and they wanted a
Wow.
38.
Wow.
And I'm like, dude, and we found that afterwards. Like, dude, don't ask questions.
Yeah.
The minute you call inbound, we somehow get word to them,
Yeah.
and they seek shelter. And like basically, like, dude, if you don't drop, they're gonna die.
Yeah.
So I mean, that went on. I mean, Kobani was insane. Like,
Yeah.
And Kobani was a challenge because, we're going up there. Originally, we're going up there with a cast loadout.
Yeah.
So like, we're all doing like air burst on the nose cones,
Yeah.
which are great. But like, if you're doing buildings with any sort of like structural integrity,
Right.
those things are eating our bombs alive because
Right.
we're moving the hard cone of them.
Yeah.
So we finally figured out that like,
Do you guys change
sorry.
that on the bird? Do you
Not
guys
on-
like
no,
dial that in there?
I can change from impact to airburst,
Uh-huh.
but like the physical cone,
Yeah.
that's on the ground.
Oh, interesting.
So the
Okay.
problem is like, even if I'm dropping something impact,
Yeah.
if it's got a quote unquote flangeable nose cone, because
Uh-huh.
you've seen those things,
Yeah.
they look like it's a black little sensor. If you're dropping those things on there, like it's essentially removing, like I hate to say it, like part of the structural integrity of the weapon on the nose of it.
Yeah.
So that there were times where like their buildings were like eating our weapons alive.
Yeah.
And
It's interesting that I've talked to quite a few military lawyers in the past about like rules of engagement, and they've explained that in the American military, there's basically no such thing as a free fire zone.
Yeah.
There always has to be some sort of intel that directs you that there's suspected enemy activity here. Good intel or bad, that's debatable. But it sounds like this is a case where actually this I don't want to use the term free fire, but I mean this was declared bad guy land.
it was funny. It was probably the closest thing to Type 3 casts that I've ever
like
seen.
World War II.
Basically,
we're
like-
leveling this place.
Yeah, like, if I go back and read, hopefully some of my CCT buddies aren't listening, but Type 1 cast is you can see both the friendly and the enemy.
Uh-huh.
Type 2 is you got to see one or the other. Type 3 was literally like that whole area is bad, and it's Type 3 is the one engagement where they don't clear you hot. They go call an engagement complete.
Yeah.
Like go engage, and you tell me when you're done mopping shit up, right?
Yeah.
So you were Winchestering every load.
Pretty close.
Yeah.
I mean, I still had to get eyes on because there were still Kurds running around. But
Sure.
I mean, what I think was happening was, so here's the craziest part about it too is I'm getting cleared hot over SATCOM by a guy on the East Coast.
Right.
I'll just say that. So we think we pieced together what was happening. It was either uniform or non-uniform guys on our side running around with the Kurds, passing intel to guys across the border. That was getting back to, again, a certain area on the East Coast, probably via sat phone. And those guys were literally clearing us hot from some desk somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. There were like fire direction centers in Iraq,
Yeah.
but still a very gnarly, convoluted process. And then it got to the point where like we were giving like iPads to the Kurds, right?
Oh, yeah. Like, yeah, basically we started doing matching buildings to numbers.
Yeah.
So the entire, and we did this a lot in Afghanistan too, but we were creating grid systems based on the buildings.
Yeah.
Like bad guys are in building 55 in this grid.
Yeah.
And then the worst was, there's times where like the cloud cover was just, I couldn't see shit.
Yeah.
And I'm basically having a release on Maggers grids or, you ever heard the term piss off?
No.
Precision Strike Suite for Special Operations Forces. It was basically mensurated graphics that I could actually derive Cat 1 coordinates for to drop.
Oh, like it sounds like what we would have called GRGs back in the old days.
It was basically a GRG, but it was
Yeah.
a computer program where you
Much
could
more exact.
You could actually derive a Cat 1 coordinate off it, so
Okay.
we were using that. But yeah, it was insane because I think the comment that I made one time was those days in Kobani, it was we were basically doing air interdiction, but we were calling it CAS.
Yeah.
Either for simplicity, because all the air crew in that time were just trained to do CAS. So I was getting, like, doctrinally speaking, getting cleared hot from a guy 4,000 miles away for a guy that I can't see, like, that's not CAS.
Right.
And in a lot of cases too, like on objectives, because the cool thing about this too was, as we're supporting the Kurds, every now and then, like, you get a guy jumping on your radio from that same organization, like, hey, dude, you're being redirected. We have objective so-and-so in sight. So that same organization was both doing the support for the Kurds, but they were also doing their HVI targeting. Like, and it was that unit that owned that portion of the world.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
like those guys were like, and they're all coming from the same op center. I mean, they had some forward guys obviously in certain areas, right? But there was a few sorties where like,
I mean, back just to like take us
Yeah.
back in time. This is like the 2014.
this is literally like months 2 and 3 of ISIS.
Yeah.
this is,
So there's really no American uniformed service members in Syria.
there's
at
no one
that
wearing.
time.
I'll just say this: there's no one wearing flags on the uniforms, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, if we had anyone over there, it was very, very minimal.
Yeah, I mean that's like I said. We'd call the JTAX 2 when we land on a VOSA phone, and they were back in the States, and you know how those guys are. Like, if you call one of those fires, just fires. This is Chris.
Actually, now that I think
Fires,
about
this
it,
is Joe.
I think the French were over there before us.
They probably. I remember for a while, we got better intel on, especially in Iraq, because you probably do remember this. Even our tier 1 units were restricted from they could not get within 1 click of an active zone. So literally the Canadians, the French, some other countries, I think.
Maybe the Brits.
I think so. They were the ones. So we were seeing, one of the crazy things I saw was, I think he's now I know he's a 1-star at the time, but Carilla, I remember the name. I think he's a 4-star now, General Carilla. He was the 1-star in the north, and he wanted a B-1 for a strike, and it was some entrenched thing near Mosul. And I'll never forget, we're in the Kayak, and we see pictures, and they looked like Polaroids, but it was literally the CanSoft dudes low crawling it, digital camera shit. And there's one point where like you see like the dirt flying over the guy's shoulder in the photo, and it's an ISIS dude digging a trench. Like, those guys got that close.
Holy
Yeah.
shit! Talk about close recce.
Yeah. So like, and I think legally we were restricted. Like, our guys couldn't go do that.
Yeah.
So,
That sounds right about that time frame.
Yeah, like I said, the fall of 14 was like, I mean, Kobani was just like a free for all. Like, it was kind of one of those things where like, if you supported Kobani and came home and only released 6 weapons, you were like kicking yourself. Like, this sucks. What was me? Like, what?
Right.
It was that insane.
Right.
Like, Kobani was out of control. And then one of the coolest things, I wish I would have caught this on my pod. This was actually, because if you guys remember, like, I think the guy Kirby was still active duty. Kerry was the Secretary of State. We had said right at the beginning, like, hey, we really can't help these people. Like, we can't get involved. It sucks, but like, we can't keep coming involved in this area. And I think, not to presume to know the inner workings of the government, but like, I want to feel like between the Sinjar Mountain thing and James Foley getting beheaded, that seemed to sort of turn public opinion.
Yeah.
That's when we got involved. And so like, Kobani went from being like this lost cause to like, through like, again, probably thousands of weapons over the course of 3 to 4 months. Like, those guys, the Kurds beat those dudes back block by block by block. And one of the coolest things I ever saw was the high ground southeast of Kobani was this area called Mishtanar Hill. And the Strike Eagle guys got it on camera. I wish I would have. But there's this cool video of, it's a sniper pod footage where the Strike Eagles are doing like a loop around the village just for like recce. And you literally see the YPG storm up the hill, toss the ice. It's almost like Iwo Jima. They throw the ISIS flag off and they plant like the yellow YPG flag. It was,
Yeah.
wish I would have flown it. Was really jealous. I wish I would have seen that.
Yeah.
But that 7 months, I would say, like, doing that mission was probably like the coolest 7 months of my life.
Yeah.
Because that happened.
So you were just pounding the shit out of some assholes.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Afghanistan. You'd still go over there, just to let them know you're still there. But I mean, this is 14. I don't think anyone thought Afghanistan would devolve into what it ended up devolving into. But
Right.
like, and then that was the focus. But then also the JSOC guys really started to, that was the big rumor for a while was, hey, save all your low collateral weapons because like Mosul's going to be hot and heavy. The Mosul offensive eventually happened like 6 months after it was planned. But like, we'd do some recce work in Mosul and it was like, I dropped twice in Mosul but like you talk to like some of the soft birds, like the U-28s and some of the other things, like, and those guys were dropping like the really, really, really low collateral precision weapons. I mean, those guys were doing like assassination missions.
You mean like Hellfires?
Not even. I'm talking like things called, like, you can Google them, but like I'll just say Google the word Griffin. I mean, these are essentially like little pneumatic things pop out of a tube, and it's essentially like a 15 or 20 pound warhead.
Yeah.
To the point where like you could be HVI number 1, I'm HVI number 2. We're having a conversation. Next thing you know, like I black out and I look up and you're dead.
Yeah.
Because this like shotgun shell on roids just went up over your head.
Yeah.
Like, yeah,
That's awesome.
it was sexy to
Yeah.
watch. Like, it was a few times I wish I had low collateral weapons, but
Yeah.
I was happy with my 500 pounder. So
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, that was, like I said, that deployment alone, I could probably go into a separate, complete hour-long story about some of the stuff we saw there. But like, yeah, it was amazing because we were generally the only platform that could get there, hang out for 3 or 4 hours at a time, and just effing work. The 1 or 2 close calls I had was, this is pretty funny. So we're doing work, and if you look at a map of Syria, Dar es-Zar, which now was the site of that
Or south.
yeah,
Of,
so it was right. It was near the Iraq border.
Yeah.
It was like maybe a kill box due off the Iraq border, so like 60 miles, if that. But that was one of the last places Assad still had a presence there, and he still had an Air Force base there. So there was one night where we're working, we're going kinetic a lot, and we're getting ready to get ripped out by a 2-ship of Vipers. And this would happen every now and then. We're like, they show up on station and like, Bone, we actually blew a lot of gas getting through some weather to get up here, dude. Like, would you mind covering the first part of our vol? We're gonna go tank. Like, yeah, of course, we'll stay and drop more weapons, of course. So this one night, you know, they go off to get gas, and then next thing you know, we start hearing a bogey call. And so if you know, geographically on the map, like Kobani, we would always fly solo.
The Ruskies weren't there yet.
They weren't there yet, no. So this is still like late 14, early 15.
Gotcha.
But occasionally, you'd randomly get like a MiG-23, a MiG-29, Al-Assad, Assad bird. So what happens is, it's kind of tough to describe geographically, but like, you know, Kobani's in like the north, almost like northwest part of the country.
I imagine the Viper pilots jagging themselves off over this opportunity.
Oh yeah, there was a few of them that were like just itching for something. But the spin said like, unless you're getting threatened, dude, let them fly. Like,
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, dude, there was definitely some behind the scenes like cabinet level conversation probably happening.
right.
But like from our standpoint, it's like, dude, unless you are getting engaged,
You leave them alone.
yeah, like I don't care if it's a MiG-29. I don't care if it's like, you know, their version of a 130. You stay outside of this certain range
Yeah.
for the spins. Like, you are hereby ordered, right?
Yeah.
So like, so we're flying. We hear a bogey call, and they're like, yeah, Bone, we got a bogey. You might want to like not be in Syria anymore. Like, all right. So like, you know, Dar es-Zar is here. We're in Kobani. And it's kind of setting up one of these things where it's like, you know, Bone 3-4 say status of bogey, you know, bogey bra,
Can
110.
you guys talk to them in the clear?
No, this is in the green, but we're talking. Oh, not those guys, no.
No.
And I don't think the Syrians even listen to guard, right?
Okay.
Right.
So it's like, but I'll never forget. Like, we're going, and I'm like, enough of this shit. I'm like, yo, blah blah blah. Say status of Viper flight. Viper flight. We egress into Iraq because the bogey. I'm like, and I'm like, so we get this straight. You egress the 2-ship of fighters,
Right.
Because there's a bogey,
Right.
And we're here.
And you're there.
And I felt bad because I found out later, I think it was a lieutenant on the bird, and you hear like the oh shit. And so we had a decoy we had the ability to launch decoys on our jet. And so I tell the young guy sitting next to me, like, yo, dude, decoy out. And at this point now, like, I might necessarily, the angle cut off, I think we would have probably beaten him into Iraq and been okay. But he started inching up this way, and it's like, does this guy know where we are? Like now, and at this point now, it's like, dude, we might have to basically run into Turkey crying, like, please don't shoot us. But like, you're a NATO ally, air quotes. That was like in my head, like as the mission commander, like we might have to literally squawk like emergency, and go like beg for forgiveness in Turkey.
Yeah.
And
Would
luckily,
not have gone over well.
It'd probably like a fucking fart in church, but like luckily it didn't happen, because at some point now, like the guy eventually just turned away, and then we found out later like it was an L-39, like just doing a night flight, like a night recce. Like I don't think you even realized we were there.
Oh, okay.
So that was a pretty funny like close call.
Do you? I mean, you can tell. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to ask you something that is restricted, classified. But do you guys have any kind of countermeasures? Or are you completely reliant on fighters?
No, so there, on paper, yes. but there's also just some realities of like, dude, if it's a certain threat with a certain missile, like where
It doesn't
the
matter.
speed of running away. Now the one thing we do have on a lot of fighters is like we have gas to blow, and like like those guys trying to chase me down, they're gonna go bingo. I've survived more red flag and weapons school events just by simply running away.
Okay.
Now, like generally at an exercise, I would run away and go low to get lost in the clutter. We could not do that in Syria because
They had surface to air, or
they didn't have, the surface to air wasn't really the worry. It was the like we ended up getting visual wasn't me personally, but we ended up getting visual confirmation of an actual man pad in Kobani.
Okay.
And it was misidentified initially as an RPG.
Uh-huh.
And then I go back and look at the table. I'm like, whoa, stop, dude. This is a problem. And the problem is, we had hogs doing shows of force. We had done a show of force, and we're like, dude, there's an effing like SA-14 equivalent thing out there. Like, this is a problem.
Right.
And so after we found that out, we stopped doing that. But yeah, like I said, the cool thing about it was, we were integral, I think, in. Kobani went from being sort of like a lost cause to like, no, we actually beat these guys out and liberated it.
Yeah.
And then, the next few months after that I was there it was like, okay, now it's the war in the Kobani suburbs. Like every little feeder town that ISIS was using to feed in, we would target those. At some point, too, this was crazy. And so the whole time this is happening, right? Just west of Kobani was the tomb of Suleiman. So it's the tomb of one of their ancient sultans, the Turks. It just happens to now be in what was called, Syria, and this is insane. That thing was guarded by a contingent of Turk special forces, and at some point when we were there, they had caught intel or whatever. Like ISIS was threatening to like basically invade it and desecrate his body and all this. So I didn't get to fly this night, but the Turks ended up launching like a 60 or 40 vehicle convoy into Syria to take the remains of Suleiman the Great. Is either the third or I forget. I have to go Google it.
Was that when they went into Jarablus?
I don't know if that was a specific town, but you can. It's on Wikipedia. Like, and I remember seeing this thing in the pod. It looks pretty cool. It's like this. It's a bridge that leads into like this little like miniature peninsula. There's like a gatehouse for like where the soft dudes live, and then literally the tomb of like this dude from like centuries ago.
Yeah.
But ISIS was claiming to like they were going to come in and like invade it and kill all the guards and. So I think we did a diversionary strike south there, and one of my buddies was airborne for it. And we stayed away, so I think their Vipers came in to provide air cover.
Yeah.
So we just kind of like, you guys do what you want.
Yeah.
We'll be over here actually like helping the Kurds. You guys can take like your George Washington and bring them home type thing.
Sure.
But yeah, just the fact that it was just like a weird little cool historical thing. Like there's this weird little like.
Yeah.
It's almost like the Vatican. Like there's this weird piece of quote unquote Turkish land. In the middle of Syria that like. You guys like protect with like this like contingent of soft dudes living in like Indian country. So so that was like I would say the first 3 or 4 months of that deployment, and then a lot of stuff started shifting back into Iraq. Like that point, I think we had a bigger presence. We had a lot more white soft dudes running around with like Iraqi soft and Iraqi national police. Some of those dudes. I got a little dicey at times because you guys remember seeing some of those YouTube clips of like the Shia militia guys that were like, the butchers of ISIS. They hate us just as much probably, but I can't confirm or deny, but there were definitely a few strikes we took part in that I think inadvertently helped those dudes.
Yeah.
But like, enemy of my enemy is my friend for that time being type shit, so.
Well, I mean, Iran was the same deal, right?
Yeah.
Iran was very much against ISIS, but Iran was never on our side.
No, and it was funny because there was that one guy, I remember what his name was. It was the one guy that had like, he was a 6'2" bodybuilder. He carried an axe with him. He had some huge bushy black beard. He was like, I forget what his name was, but he was like, I guess the Farsi way they described, he was the angel of death. I think is what his nickname was.
Yeah.
But
I remember
you know this guy now, like
Yeah.
a roided up dude with a black beard, like a pirate. I forget which militia he was a part of, but
Was it Jaish al-Shabi?
it might have been. But I lost track of all, the Jam, because the Jam came back when I was there. The Mahdi army came back when we were there. But yeah, it was actually crazy too because, I mean, you were a fifth group guy. You could probably appreciate this. Do you remember in 07, unfortunately, the 3 guys got kidnapped and eventually got, they were 101st guys. They weren't fifth group guys, but there were 4 Campbell guys. This was 07 in Iraq.
Down in like Karbala or
Yeah,
something.
it was in that where they call it the Sunni Triangle.
Yeah,
It was one of those areas. But the first time I really got shot at was the unit out looking for those guys got hit by an IED, and I guess the EOD trooper, whoever it was pretty sharp. You could tell it was a command wire, so the guys were around. So we did one show of force, ICOM chatter got generated, and then this was really dumb on our part. We did a re-attack show of force, but we came back to the same heading. And as we're coming back for the second go around, like we look over and like, you know, and thankfully it was an RPG, but like that was the first time, like oh shit, like.
Yeah.
And then every time we would do shows of force in that area, like the jam would shoot at us, you know, but it, you know, it was kind of funny. Like we joked that like every show of force we did, we made them piss through their AK bullets because they were literally just shooting up with an AK,
Yeah.
hoping for a golden BB,
Yeah.
just following our jet noise.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the things are like, you know, hopefully falling out of the sky and hitting them back on the rebound. So we'll see. But
Yeah.
you know, it was, but yeah, that was. I came home June of 15. So I missed the Russians, and then I did 2 more weapons school sorties as an instructor, and then, you know, basically became a dirty staff weenie after that. You know, went to the Pentagon, did weapons requirements, which is actually a really cool job. I was actually able to, I guess one of my cool stories, if you can even really have a cool story from the Pentagon, was, you know, we realized after too many years that, you know, having a Hellfire or having a 250-pound SDB is not really quote-unquote low collateral. We really needed some sort of a forward-firing ordnance. And so BAE had actually built this thing called APKWS, Advanced Precision Kill Weapon. And what it is it's a laser-guided rocket on the front of a 275. I'm sorry, it's a laser guidance kit on the front of a 275 rocket. It's actually pretty genius because apparently we have like hundreds of thousands of 275 rockets in our arsenal. And so the Marines were the first to acquire them. We were kind of trying to like beg, borrow, and steal from them. And I'll never forget, for anything to happen in the Air Force, I would probably need like a 1 or 2 stars approval, right?
Right.
The guy in the Marines that was controlling this stockpile, he was operating on standing orders from his 3-star. Like, I can't go below a certain number. But anything after that, dude, you want to hop in front of our production line, feel free.
That's awesome.
So I remember going down to the bar, because I actually was lucky enough to work in the fighter bar. We got him down to the bar, and Thriller was his call sign. Ryan Schill, yeah, I actually won't say it. Yeah, Thriller was his call sign. He was a Cobra guy. And I'll never forget, like, we actually got the deal done just by me giving him a 6-pack. And we were able to get 30 rockets to Bath for the Vipers to use on some JSOC targets. So that was actually a pretty cool, like, Pentagon war story. And then the next 7 years was like, you know, I just punched the clock and, you know, did weapons stuff. So
do you guys like what's the nature of like electronic warfare? Because you talk about the ICOM chatter.
Yeah.
Did you guys have? And we're used to like the EW birds, but as EW becomes more advanced and the suites become more compact, are they able to squeeze like an EW suite on birds like yours?
that's what well, I'd say for the legacy stuff, in theory, yes. But the problem is, as you can imagine, there is like zero appetite to upgrade legacy systems that are not going to play in the Pacific.
Sure.
So I would say right now, the one thing that they're going to work on for the Super Hornet is going to be a digitized version of something that can be upgraded modularly. You know, there is the ability. The problem is there's just no appetite to spend a few $100 million in NRE, non-recurring engineering, to refurbish basically what is a legacy system.
Right.
Because at some point, even if you gave it unlimited power and even if you gave it like the greatest electronic attack techniques, at the end of the day, if it's not stealth, it's a honking huge platform. And the threats that are getting developed right now are just to the point where, like, I don't even think you have a chance. Like, if you're a 4th generation platform getting within a certain range of something, like you're like the PK of them getting a hit on you is pretty high.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, that's what we sort of train to, yet I think you look, I mean, I hate to say it, but, you know, even before what's happening right now in Gaza, I think the Israelis routinely prove that there is a way. Now, granted, the Israelis are flying F-35s and doing some amazing stuff, but it's like, you know, there's the on-paper capes, and then I guess there's like, you know, the push to test, right? Like, you know,
You're talking about all these drones that they shot down the other day?
it's that. I'm even talking about like waking up and finding out like they got into like downtown Damascus and downtown here that are protected by fairly advanced Russian stuff, most likely with some Russian mercs operating it possibly.
Yeah.
And somehow they're still getting through.
Yeah.
And I don't, I'm not reading any more to that stuff, but it's like I'm wondering how much of it is a combination of the aircraft, the weapon types, but like, on paper that really shouldn't be happening, but
Yeah.
somehow they're proving it to happen. I mean, look at Ukraine.
Yeah.
Like they worried us for a long time on, but the Ukrainians are literally with like spit and glue and elbow grease and ingenuity. Like, like for instance, I don't know the specifics of it. It was open source though, but like, we gave them a bunch of AGM-88s harms that we were going to decommission anyway.
Yeah.
They literally jerry-rigged them to work on their MiGs,
Yeah.
which is an American weapon on a Russian fighter,
Yeah.
and made it work.
Yeah.
So, there's the capability piece, and then I think honestly just the application piece.
So because you mentioned like the chance of NG four or Generation 4 like platform getting to target. Do you think that even with Gen 5 or moving forward, when we look at like hypersonics, when we look at things like that, do you think that there's a point where if it's not like an orbital platform or an atmospheric platform that we're going to move past the idea of bomber?
I think, and I'm not smart enough to conjure this up, but like at some point, right? Like everything that we're doing right now, let's be honest, it's evolutionary. It's not revolutionary. So we're adding a few more extra miles on a weapon. We're adding a few more layers of quote unquote low RCS, right? But we're very rapidly, maybe not very rapidly, but at some point we're gonna basically get to like the cost curve where like it's gonna take me in the billions to get you like a degree, maybe 2 of better RCS. It's gonna take me in the billions to get a few hundred more miles on this missile. Like at some point, like we're just gonna get to like this standoff of, a near peer in the Pacific with tyranny at distance is building systems that are gonna keep us out, like basically to Hawaii.
Right.
And then we're gonna spend in the billions to like fight. So at some point, it's just gonna be like, like what do you do here? And
Right.
that's when I think what gets worrisome is that's when you start seeing this shift to, let's just say, other planes.
Right.
Leo, this, that, the other thing. Like that's truly like, I think a lot of people sort of scoffed, maybe me included, when the whole Space Force was created. But like, I mean, I think the world is evolving to a level where space, you can no longer have space sort of be a subcomponent of a service. Like, and maybe the first few years until like that, like, I don't think, and even some people in the military probably don't realize like what a problem that area is going to be and how contested it's going to be. So maybe some guys like, why do we need a Space Force? Like, it's kind of one of those things where like it will more than prove its worth, I think, in the future.
Yeah.
Because you really can't afford to have like, why have the Air Force and the Army and the Navy, and we have a space expertise or a space command of that? Like, that's just not going to cut it. Like, you essentially need a dedicated service.
Sure.
Kind of in the same way like the Marines.
Right.
Like, I can't just have like a specialty part of the Army do the amphibious small unit, self-contained MEF concept. Like, you actually need a service to do that.
Right.
Yeah,
So
the difference between like from a counterinsurgency or counterterrorism mission to fighting, if another global war happens and our stuff that's in space gets shot down, all those modern capabilities we've been describing for the last few hours here are like kind of off the table.
they go
right?
away.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's the thing. Like, no matter how many times we try to train to it, it's going to be a rough go of it if we are truly GPS out. Like we, part of our training syllabus is we would train GPS out, and we had an INS, inertial navigation system. We would train how to actually keep that thing working without GPS crack hits going to it every 6 seconds.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's a difference between doing it on a training mission to check off a training box versus like doing it for real.
Right. Right. I mean, you guys are probably old enough to remember like the Thomas guys, like who knows how to use a Thomas guide now?
I don't. Yeah. Like that. I don't even know how to like do like you think about it too. Like, it's one thing doing it like over land or in vicinity of land.
Right.
But you look at the guys that have to do like celestial navigation.
Yeah,
Because you're
exactly.
like your feet wet for 6-7 hours.
Yeah.
Like, that's gonna happen.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Sometimes when you describe the current, like the next fight, possibly you hope it doesn't happen. But when you try to put it for scale, it's like, dude, imagine trying to go from New York to California over nothing but water,
Right.
with no frame of reference.
Right.
And that's like the distances we're talking about when we think we're going to quote unquote operate in that area.
Right.
Like, it's going to be an interesting, from what I've seen, at least from when I left the service, when I got back from my deployment in 19, it was 2035, 2035, right? And then it slowly started to shift to like, dude, we're not going to get to 35 if we can't fix today and 27 and 30. And then at least now, from the Air Force perspective, now, like I walk around all these trade shows and it's like a lot of the young airmen and a lot of the young operators now are all wearing, like on their flight suits or the uniform, they're wearing 2027 pen tabs as like a constant reminder, like, yeah, dude, this is like around the corner.
Yeah.
And then to your point about the fourth gen piece, like, I think there's probably sometimes there's probably a mischaracterization of what we think our force structure is going to look like. Like, dude, even if it's 2030, 2035, like, A, we don't have the money to do it, and B, we're not going to have the range to just have an entire fifth gen force.
Right.
Like, the buff is still going to be here. Sounds like the B-1 might still be here. Like, a large chunk, I think, of our aircraft, our combat air force, is still going to be fourth gen.
Yeah.
I mean, the Navy, I mean, you know what? Like the Super Hornets, like that thing is, I mean, you saw Top Gun too. Like that thing, I mean, that thing will probably fly to the 2030s and beyond.
Yeah.
Like just because I would say the 35 is a little range limited. It's one engine. The loadout is not what we need it to be. So like even again, if money was no object and you gave Lockheed Martin a blank check, like an entire all F-35 force is not the right answer.
Right.
So
right.
that's kind of like that's sort of like the science, you know, it's like an art and a science they say about like, you know, force design planning is like, what is the right high-low mix of like fourth to fifth gen stuff? And that's been like, that debate has raged on for like the last decade, I would say at least.
Well, and I mean, would you, and not being an expert in this field, I would say that things like A-10s and AC-130s are arguably like third gen, but they still have function. And so many times the services or Congress, like they outrun their headlights by trying to mothball these things when they still have.
You even see SOCOM getting their little crop duster.
Yeah. Oh, that thing's actually gonna be pretty cool to watch.
And it does have a use in a counterinsurgency conflict.
It does, and that's the thing. Well, it's funny you bring that up because you know, for years I was a little bitter towards big Air Force, you know, Big Blue, 'cause it's like, you know, we ran our B-1 into the ground, right? Like we beat the piss out of it. We had to get rid of a bunch of jets. You know, when I went active duty and started flying, I want to say we had 62 or 63 B-1s. We're down to like 45 now because we've had to mothball a lot of them. We had to get rid of the hangar queens to redirect assets into the flying ones. And one of my really good friends, I won't narc him out here, but pretty brilliant dude. And on one of our deployments, just because he was bored, he ran the numbers on, you know, cost per flight hour, the maintenance cost, like, and he goes, the cost in 6 months that it took to have a Bone squadron and an F-15 squadron, that money, you literally could have outfitted, let's say, Herat and Mez up in the north with like 18 or 12, either AT-6s or Super Tucanos, right? And you could have had fighter pilots doing a 6-month tour, doing those things. We did it with other aircraft.
Yeah.
And sure enough, what we end up doing 10 years later, we bought the Afghans A-29s. Yeah. So it's like, it's like we you know, the U.S. Air Force and like, you know, the Navy, like they were not designed to do coin, right? They're designed to fight a near peer.
Right.
But unfortunately, I think for us is, you know, I don't think any of us thought it would be 20 years of coin.
Right.
And it just really bled down these things that we're going to need night one.
Yeah.
So hit questions for Brian.
Yeah, please.
So you definitely know about like the next generation air dominance fighter.
NGAD,
Yeah. I mean, that's supposed to replace F-22, F-15s for the most part, right?
In a way, yeah. I think it's going to be I think and I have to kind of unremember some of the. I got Men in Black, you know, when I left active duty, obviously, but I would just say NGAD is going to be the fancy buzz term is this thing called family of systems. Yeah. I think NGAD is going to be the initial tranche in a family of capabilities, if you will. Like, I don't think it's going to flat out replace anything, in all honesty. Like, I think when the 22 goes away, unfortunately, I think it's going to be more because of money and manning and funding. I think I would kind of equate NGAD in a little, this is my opinion, I could be wrong, but kind of in the way that hypersonics are not going to replace all weapons, right? They're going to be complementary because A, we can't afford to be an all hypersonic force. It's going to complement an existing force structure. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I think NGAD is going to kind of come on in small batches, and NGAD, I think B-21 maybe won't be that exquisite, but like those are the things you're going to see. Like, I don't even mean like night one. That's going to be like minute one, hour one. Like those are going to be the things that like literally do like break. Like they're going to be like the safe breaker for like the first few hours.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay,
Gad's gonna be manned and unmanned, right? Like,
that's the thought process. They kind of keep going back and forth on that, but yes, that's at least the initial thought. The production line and whatever they're going to use for NGAD in theory could eventually be a souped-up version of this thing called the CCA, the Collaborative Combat Autonomous thing. And that's the thought process with CCAs is I could have one F-35 force multiplying itself by controlling 5 or 6 of these unmanned CCAs to sort of do its bidding,
Yeah.
if you will. It's carrying weapons, it's going forward, it's doing forward launch, and it's sort of being like a loyal wingman to a fighter.
Yeah.
Right, slaved off to the human operator.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
You know, one thing we talked about, like we talked about sort of the policy, you know, the how the close air support and things like that
Buddy, for a
became
refill, I'll do Hill Rock this time.
became a lot more restrictive, and we've talked on you know to guys like JTAX before and people who are like, yeah, I had to have like a 3-page. Like a 3-page thing prepared to justify a call for fire.
Yeah.
We've talked about that, but one of the things that we didn't talk about that I'd love to hear from you is like one of the things that frustrated a lot of ground troops, and I think a lot of pilots and air crews with at least the Air Force in the latter parts of the war was like AC-130 couldn't fly during the day. That there were people in high level positions that were placing the airframe above the troops on the ground.
Yeah.
Did you guys have any experience with that?
We did. So like here's like a B1 nuanced example. The first 2 or 3 deployments, when I did shows of force, we were restricted to 5,000 feet over the ground, and it took us like a deployment or 2 to convince the leadership, like, you're actually making me a bigger target at 5,000 feet, like simply from like a trig standpoint, like. And we actually eventually got the GOs to get it down to 1,000 feet in combat. But you think about it, like if I'm the bad guy, and we want to scare him, generate ICOM chatter on him, generate a fix on him. Like if I'm flying at 5,000 feet, it's like the equivalent of seeing like the team house thing. That fucker could beat me all day, and I think we just assumed that all of the capable, SA-7 equivalents like IR manpads were gone by that point. But it's like, you're actually giving that dude a better chance to kill me higher than if you let me literally scream up on him at 500 or 1,000 feet.
Right.
So that's like no joke, a B1 specific example that was real. That's one. Trying to think of some other ones, like, for a while, if it was in defense of a guy on the ground, like, if my wing happened to clip Pakistan, like, okay, whatever, shit happens. Like, my 3rd and 4th deployment, you encroached on Pakistan like by a millimeter, you were going home.
Wow.
Like it was, yeah. And I think some of that's politics. Some of that's around the time of like the Torkham Gate incident.
Yeah.
Where, again, I've talked to some guys that were involved in that, and I think when you're doing body searches afterwards and you're finding pack mill IDs on bad guys, we might have had a reason to engage. But,
Right.
But you had to kind of eat it because it's a political thing. And,
Right.
and you guys remember like that actually fucked a lot of the guys in country for a while, because like they did not. You can only get so much inbound to Afghanistan via the air. Like
Yeah.
most of that stuff was like the
the
trucks.
ground,
So
right.
when
Yeah.
that stuff was closed, that was a problem.
Yeah.
When they would close the beach road to us, like that was a problem.
Yeah.
Because like at that point now, like the guys in country are restricted to like like anyone that was in country, like that's all you're getting. Like bones aren't coming.
Yeah.
F-15s at that point had moved to DOF, like they're not coming.
Yeah.
The boat guys aren't coming. Like so that like that's sort of a different argument. I apologize, but like yeah, but it leads into like you'd almost have to like be willing to put your wings on the table, going like, yep, cool, send me home, take my wings, but like that guy was gonna get a weapon,
Yeah.
whether you like it or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
One story was, you guys remember Marja 2010, and that was a McChrystal thing too. But like they told us for 3 months leading up to it, like you will not drop on night. You Bones, you're there to like prevent Somalia from happening, but like basically it's like we don't even want you here because you're ruining our whole message of like people outreach and everything else. But it's like
The war's over, bro.
Yeah.
yeah, and then no shit, sure enough, night 1, Marja, Marines took a tick, and like my buddy was flying, God bless him, and
Yeah.
we're like, no, like, you're getting a weapon, and I don't care if I have to give my effing wings up, like this guy's getting a weapon.
Yeah.
And what was nuts about that was like because it was such a high profile op, it was literally a single 38, and I think by the time he landed, there was at least 2 GOs hanging around, trying to get in his shit. the debrief for a single weapon was like 3-4 hours. Whereas like I've gone Winchester and been in and out in like 45.
It's fucking ridiculous. I mean,
So
it's
that
just-
was. I mean, I think to your point, what you asked was about like arbitrary restrictions on the aircraft. I think the two like that I can think of really is like the border incursion shit, and then
Yeah.
again the show of force thing blew us away for a while. It's like, dude, you're painting, you're basically screaming at like I'm making it easier for you.
Yeah.
Because now I'm at 20,000, I'm at 5,000. Like, please come kill me. Like,
Yeah.
please fucking take a shot. When they finally smartened up and let us go down to 1,000, that's when we actually started getting better effects.
Yeah.
So I think for years we had desensitized the enemy to like, okay, cool, the infidels are flying, they'll put on an air show, then they'll leave, and then we can go back to doing what we do.
Right.
When we started doing that tactic, like that's when like they like everything else, so they adapted to that. But there was actually a cool 6-month period where like the ICOM got scary again. Like, they're not fucking around. Like,
Yeah.
they're letting the infidels come down and because they thought for a while like we were like a hog, like I could shoot you with a gun.
Yeah, yeah.
So we let them think that obviously, but
Yeah.
you know, there were times where like we would change, and you had to give them credit. Like those guys could adapt like no other.
Sure.
And we would take, you know,
They figured everything out pretty quickly.
it took, you know, I remember Gates's quote when he was the SecDef, you know, we're being out propaganded by a guy in a cave.
yeah.
And we have an entire, you know, $1 billion public affairs machine and messaging and psyops and stuff. So,
Yeah.
which I don't think was the fault of our guys. It took the first 06 year chain of command to approve something.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the local Taliban, you know, fucking platoon sergeant equivalent was like, yeah, cool, get it out there.
Yeah. Yeah. So questions from viewers. What's the story behind Brian's call sign of Sloth?
Oh shit! Wow. Okay. So the way, like, at least in our squad, you know, so a naming ceremony is not like what you see like in the movies. Like, it's not like cool call signs. It's usually something dumb and stupid you did. So in my early days,
Ball duster.
yeah, you know, or you know,
fucker.
or Merkin or something. But no. So what happened was, I had a habit for. In South Dakota, obviously, the elements are not really in your favor if you want to get smashed and make it home safely sometimes. So I would find some ingenious places to sleep. Mostly it was ATM dwellings and bank. So like, but I had a gift. I could nap anywhere, anytime. So between exhibiting sloth-like behavior when they did our ceremony, at the time I was the deputy mayor of our bar, and the mayor was Chunks. So then somebody decided to superimpose my face on the sloth from the Goonies. So the combination of like Sloth the animal, because I was napping and moving slow all the time,
Yeah.
because I was, you know, being a lush, and then Chunk, you know, Sloth from the Goonies.
Yeah.
Baby Ruth.
Yeah.
No, for like about a month after I got named, I was finding fucking baby roots in like my flight bag, my helmet.
I would love
my
that
fucking-
personally. I love some baby
Well,
roots.
it was, but it was like,
Get on the net.
Yeah.
Hey, you
yeah,
guys.
like when you're in deployment, you're in meathead mode, right? You
Yeah.
want to get in shape. You're not boozing as much, obviously, as
Yeah.
a deed. But it's like, you know, I'm like, dude, get this fat boy candy away from me.
Yeah.
I have a girl to disappoint when I come home. I
Yeah.
want to like have like a 3-pack, you know, for the deployment. So yeah, but like most aircrew things, it's generally like either something you did stupid once, or just like a repeated demonstration of behavior.
Yeah.
Apparently between the, and this is back before the days of like really good. This is like 06, 07. No, it was actually it was 06. So I remember the guy who did the Photoshop. It was like Rembrandt, like how he did this Photoshopping.
Yeah.
It was like, it didn't look like it was fake.
Yeah.
Like the guy made all the creases work and the coloring, so it's like the guy misses calling.
That's
It was
awesome.
what his call sign was, but yeah. But yeah, sorry, I wish there was a better story behind it.
Alex, thank you very much. Do you think non-stealth bomber platforms will have a future in near-peer or symmetrical conflicts in the future, or will everything be drones and stealth aircraft?
No, I definitely think at least for the next decade or more, I think for two reasons. A, we don't have the number of jets to do. I think right now drones based from aircraft capability, we're pretty limited to what we can do with those things. Like I mentioned before, I think the CCA concept is still a few years away, but I would argue from it's, you also got to think about too, like the cost of just retiring everything, but then regenerating a new platform from scratch is going to be pretty impossible.
Yeah.
That's going to create at least a multi-year gap. So yes, but I would say obviously as the threats increase and push you out further, it's going to demand. So the role I see for fourth generation aircraft, especially bombers, is in the initial phases of a conflict in a near peer, it's probably going to be your cruise missile and hypersonic carrier. That'll probably be the first couple days of the war, or whenever they're able to get in.
Yeah.
And then, like most things, I don't really know if we have a good example in recent history of what we can compare what we think the next one would be. But like everything else, right? Like, Iraq was hot and heavy with a traditional IADS takedown, and then within a few weeks or so, like it transitioned into, we pretty much own the air. Their fighters are gone. Their SAMs are gone. Now we're just sort of doing like, air superiority, sort of complete dominance of the air, where I can kind of come and go as I please and just do either HVI takedowns, systems takedowns, like kind of like what the old Scud hunts in Desert Storm 1.
Yeah.
But that comes after the initial sort of like door kick phase, right?
Yeah.
Where we have to kick down their IADs, make air, we have to basically have air supremacy. I think the days of us ever having air supremacy ever again are probably over.
Yeah.
I think we will probably have momentary time slices of air superiority for a little bit, but dominance and supremacy probably never going to happen again.
It's going to be contested.
Yeah. And I think we'll have fleeting moments of it, but then they're going to regroup, regen, and we hope that we've accomplished what we wanted to target, and we get out of Dodge.
Yeah. Bear Holmes, thank you very much. Say China invaded Taiwan tomorrow. What aircraft in the current inventory would be the most important?
I want to say it's a loaded question. It's probably because we don't. I would say it's a really good question. It's tough because I'm not saying anything.
The aircraft work in conjunction with one another, right?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I really probably can't pin it down to one aircraft.
Right.
Believe it or not, and this doesn't sound. It's not a sexy answer, but like some of the most crucial aircraft in this fight are going to be your tankers, your early warning, all your what we call HAVA, and HAVA is HVAA, high value air assets is what HAVA stands for. So really, it's tough to pin it down to one because unfortunately, F-35s are not going to have the legs to get there. Bones without any sort of protection. I would say right now it's not necessarily the aircraft that's going to determine it. I would say it's going to be the weapons, and because there's nothing in that fight. There's no aircraft that we have that is just untouchable.
Right.
So really, and we're kind of learning this the hard way, and I'm kind of dancing around the question, but we learned way too late a long time ago that we've been building amazing fifth and with NGAD and B-21 6th-gen aircraft, but we've been doing it without a thought to the weapons they're going to carry. So case in point, I had an old general one time who said that if you guys are not irate over the fact that a big part of the F-35's loadout is a 70s technology weapon, GBU-38, like you're not angry enough. And that's been our problem, is we've been so heavily focused, I would say, on aircraft development over the last 2 decades that we missed the boat in a lot of ways on weapons.
Uh-huh.
We let a lot of the weapons industry atrophy, in my personal opinion. And we didn't really learn the lessons of like what other adversaries, knowing they can't compete with us, what they're going to do. The whole term third offset, you could argue that Russia realized that they were going to lose that war again. So what they start doing? They started investing in the really non-sexy stuff: electronic warfare jamming, comms dispersion, psyops, rotting us from within with propaganda. Like we're probably in the midst of the largest counterintelligence campaign in history every day, with just like Chinese water torture, drip, 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 a little lie here, a little lie there, right? Because they don't operate like us. They don't operate in 4-year
Just
election
slowly
cycles.
demoralize people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like making us hate our fellow bro.
Right.
Like,
And the Chinese are the same way. They operate generationally, not like every 4 years.
yeah, we
like,
operate in 4-year chunks,
Yeah.
and 8-year chunks, and anyone that can think out to the 30s thinks he's like some sort of master strategic guy. It's like, no, dude, like China's plan is the 100-year plan.
Yeah.
Russia just operates like it'll be the same guy in charge forever, which he probably will be till he, dies.
Right,
But like,
right.
that's unfortunately like we're the greatest country in the world, but like it's also one of our downfalls. Is
Yeah.
we have a democratic system that, let's be honest, it's scary how easily exploitable it is. It feels
Sure.
like. I don't know how we got off on that topic, but it's kind of sort of related, I would say, in the sense of, I think we thought we could get away with just focusing on aircraft for a long time and not really doing the weapons piece.
Yeah.
We're starting to catch up a little bit, but I think we're a ways behind.
Yeah.
So that's so I don't know if I can necessarily say an aircraft. I would argue if you put a gun to my head, it would probably be one of the bombers, assuming that we could get a hypersonic capability within the next 2 years.
Yeah.
That would be my best guess.
JK, thank you very much. Thoughts on the bird seen on Alphabet Soup's compound calf? Definitely not an RQ-170.
I don't wait. What was the question?
I think they called it like the Beast of Kandahar or something.
Oh, that thing. What are my thoughts on it? That happened. This is the one that happened in 2010, right?
I think it was a drone that they were flying off of Kandahar.
Oh yeah, the Beast of Canada. Yeah, so the RQ-170. Like, what do I think happened there?
I guess he's just asking what you think about
What do
it.
you think about thoughts on the bird seen on Alphabet?
He says
Soup?
definitely not an RQ-170. I think the guy's probably referencing like some black side drone.
Okay.
Which
I might have been being coy. Like I'm actually not. I know it's like I have no answer for his question.
Yeah.
The only thing I will tell him is my personal opinion. It's kind of sort of related. Is how Iran got their hands on the 170 is I think they had outside help.
Yeah.
I think unfortunately there was a backdoor. There was a vulnerability there that they probably did not pull off on their own. And what I found cute about that whole thing is over the last, because that happened like 15 years ago now, I think, right?
yeah.
What's cute about it is when they put the thing on display, they had this almost like banquet curtain underneath. If you guys look at pictures when the Iranians displayed it, it had this like banquet curtain like underneath
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
like it was like a quinceañere or something.
Yeah.
Which leads me to believe is I think that thing ate dirt big time when
Yeah,
it landed, and
yeah.
the undercarriage of that aircraft is fucked.
Yeah.
So sorry, it's not answering his question. but,
Yeah.
I mean,
I would just point out there are black side drones that are flying operationally, and not my area of expertise, but
Yeah,
that
not-
stuff is out there. It's pretty, pretty gnarly.
it's definitely out there.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll say that. Yeah.
like stuff that has never been revealed to the public.
Oh yeah. And so when people say like, you think there's aliens at 51, like I don't think there's aliens. No, that's where our shit gets built.
Yeah.
Like there's. I'm not the first guy to say this, but the quickest way to go to jail as an active duty Air Force officer is clip the container at a red flag or a weapons school. Like
Yeah.
that thing was like, you got anywhere remotely near that thing, like you're done.
Yeah.
So I mean, and I don't think it's for the reasons that people think it is.
Right.
It's.
Right. It's not because they don't want you to see ET.
Yeah, like I'm not saying there's not ET. I just don't think ET's there.
Yeah,
I think ET's.
yeah.
If there is an ET, he's somewhere else.
Yeah. Des Moines.
Yeah, or Council Bluffs, Iowa.
Denver
Yeah.
Airport.
Yeah, exactly. Like
Got one more question about ET, actually.
Do we really?
Yeah, from Danny. Has any of Brian's fellow aviators ever confided to him about experiencing a UFO encounter during a flight or mission?
Oh, UAPs.
Wow. The answer is no, and the only reason I would say that is because when you read all the reports, and I think there's a common theme when you read the reports, right? It's all Navy pilots who see it, and it's generally all Navy pilots doing it off the water.
Uh-huh.
So, and again, and some of these guys are pretty credible, and they say like, I'm an aero major from the Naval Academy. Like, things are not supposed to do that
Right.
at that G limit at that speed.
Right.
So it really could be something. And again, I'm not playing coy, former government worker. Like it really could be something that cannot be explained.
Yeah.
My theory also is that, you guys right now, if you wanted to, could go online and look up pictures of like stuff we have out in the desert, because there's aircraft watchers with better cameras than we have that see these things take off.
Yeah.
There's only so much secrecy I think you can do with some of our really high level PID covered programs over land. So I would not be shocked if we are doing some next level weapons development out over the water.
Right.
And it just happens to be at a time where like there's a 4-ship of Hornets taking off from
That makes sense. I
yeah,
wouldn't have thought of that.
that's just my personal opinion.
Yeah.
It's because it always happens to be. It always just seems to be the Navy,
Yeah.
and it always, at least the ones I've heard about, it seems to be over the water.
Yeah.
So that's just my and I'm also if some credible whistleblower comes forward someday and says like no they're actually okay, cool. I guess I don't 100% say like there's not out there.
Right.
I think the more realistic near-term explanation is that that's probably where we've moved a lot of our advanced development of stuff.
It's interesting because I know that a lot of like credible pilots have reported like seeing things that they
Yeah.
couldn't explain.
Yeah.
I didn't know that it was like they were prevalent, like it was Navy, primarily Navy, and that does make sense.
Yeah, and if I go back, and I don't want to make a general statement,
Sure.
I could, because somebody will probably tell me like, no, you missed this specific case on this
Yeah.
date. Like you're probably right, because I actually, it's kind of like almost being in an air show.
Yeah.
When I get guys come up to me going like, why don't you know more about? Why do I know more about your aircraft than you do? I'm like, I don't know, dude, because I like to go out and party and
Yeah.
I'm like, and I don't mean I don't mean
Jane's defense manuals all
Yeah.
the
yeah, and I don't mean,
exactly.
and I don't want to denigrate people who really take an interest in aviation.
Yeah,
like, 'cause
yeah.
Yeah.
it's awesome.
Yeah.
But it's like I've definitely been stumped at air shows.
Yeah.
About shit about my own aircraft.
Yeah.
Like, dude, that's thanks for telling me. I'll use it as a trivia nugget now for a young guy. But like,
That's
you know what I
funny
mean?
that nerds come out and
But,
challenge.
but,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's the same way as like Star Trek fans
Exactly.
know more than the actors,
Yeah,
the
it's-
writers.
or even like
do.
you, like as a former Green Beret guy, like I mean, you know, did you know about this mission in 19? Like, I
Yeah.
didn't, but thanks for telling me. Like,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You learn things all
Yeah.
the time.
yeah,
Yeah.
so that's kind of part of it. So
Yeah.
I don't mean to denigrate, make fun of anyone. Like I just the ET, you know, unexplained vehicle thing. Like I just don't. Maybe I should. I just don't take a huge interest in it.
Yeah.
So it's like the ones that I can remember off the top of my head. It just always seems to be a Navy guy over the water. And
Yeah.
that's why I say that.
Yeah.
Sorry, long way of saying I don't know. Sorry, bro.
We have one more.
Oh,
Yeah,
go
sure.
ahead, D.
What are some of the interesting ways the crew would pass time on a long sortie?
That's a really good one. So kind of like
Candy Crush.
Bubbles was a great one. We play that game Tanks with each other because we could jerry rig our laptops to see each other. Mostly, to be honest with you, it was a lot of iPod, a lot of music, a lot of iPod playing, and it's crazy because like an average OEF combat sortie was anywhere from about 12 to 13 hours.
Wow.
The vol time, the vol time of you being in country was anywhere from 6 to 8. So, I mean, really, you had about a rough wag of it would be like I had 2.5 hours to actually get on station,
Yeah.
about another 2.5 to get home.
Yeah.
And you mix in some decks, some go pills there just to
Yeah.
keep you alert.
Yeah.
But yeah, shit, we had one guy literally complete like his master's just on drone time.
Yeah.
That's
Uh,
amazing.
For a lot of years, you guys will probably get a kick out of this. Do you guys remember, like, again, because it was the Air Force, because we have to be the Air Force, we have to be those guys. Reflective belts were like, if you don't wear, basically, if you don't wear a reflective belt, it's the equivalent of like letting an insurgent in the base.
Yeah,
Like,
it's almost a war crime.
You scumbag!
Yeah,
How
it's
dare
almost
you?
a war
Like, I
crime.
will flog you.
Yeah.
Never you level with
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
You filth bag. So it's like we had one of my buddies. I'll begin the link to this because I'm shouting him out right now. But like, as like the biggest fuck you to leadership, he literally by hand, he took a reflective belt on a jet one time. This is actually over the course of a few sorties, and he was cutting out parts. He was cutting off pieces of the reflective belt, and by hand sewing in Velcro to the reflective belt. And so for a while, he was like, "Yeah, I'm wearing my reflective belt." He was making like pencil patch tab reflective belts,
That's hilarious.
but it's like. I looked at it one time and I'm like, dude, can you imagine if you just used your powers for good?
Yeah.
You could fucking cure cancer, or like you could invent the next. But you're hand sewing reflective belt patches just to piss off like the local wing commander. Like,
Honestly, I reflective belts, if I remember, like started to really become a thing like in Bagram, maybe around like 2000. Was it 2000?
It was, yeah.
And at that point, I was like, all right, we've already lost this war. Like when that becomes the thing,
Yeah,
when that
yeah.
becomes everybody has
I wasn't-
like.
I remember at Fort Benning, they were like, your first line supervisor gets fired if you're not wearing a reflective
so,
belt.
yeah.
And in Ranger Battalion, there's a lot of angry privates, angry at their team leader. And
So
so there's
just
a joke, like,
magically,
in the
yeah.
middle of a run, we're all going to jettison
Yeah,
our
we had.
reflective belts.
I wasn't a huge fan of the guy's comedy, but I do remember there was a video of Carlos Mencia, and he's at he's at a USO show, and it was either Al Udeid or it wasn't like an Afghan or Iraqi base, but he just went off on this tangent, and he was basically like pointing out like the 06 that was in charge of the policy, like calling him a loot, like you fucking like, and the whole crowd's like cheering.
Oh
like,
my
yeah, and then
God,
this guy's
man.
just kind of sitting there like and eat it because it's like,
Yeah.
all right, yeah, I'm the asshole who put this policy in place, but
Yeah.
like, Big Blue wants me to.
As we wrap up tonight,
Yeah.
do you want to talk about what you're doing today, what you're up to nowadays?
Yeah, retired active duty from the Pentagon as an air staff officer. Took a job with a defense company. It's probably one of the last few remaining ones in the Northeast area, which is really awesome because it gets me closer to home. But yeah, just trying to learn trying to not be your classic sleazy business development or BD guy. But no, in my space, I'm primarily focused
You're
on...
not a VC guy. It's okay.
Yeah, primarily focused on the electronic warfare aspect, even though my background's more sort of weapons. But no, honestly, you guys probably went through the same thing, right? Like I'm I'll be about a year in June of sort of being out of uniform, and it still feels not real.
Yeah.
So I'm really just trying to find my way and
Yeah.
Still kind of like learn the ways of what
Booze Allen Hamilton.
not that bad. Hopefully. Maybe one day, who knows? But
Yeah.
no, honestly, really just trying to get settled back in the area and kind of learn the new language of. And it's really weird at times. Like it's big boy in a really weird way.
Yeah.
It's like there's been a few times where I've just been like, I really kind of wish I had like a reg or an AFI to go back to right now because like I crave that like structure.
Yeah.
Because some of the shit today is like, yeah, dude, you had a meeting with so and so, and I just show up.
Yeah.
Like wear a suit. I'm like,
Yeah.
anything else? Like, nah, you'll figure it out. I'm like,
Yeah.
I will.
Yeah.
There's like money apparently being discussed. Like I don't feel ready. Like, just do it.
Yeah.
So that part's a little weird, but no, yeah. So just back in the area doing defense contracting and trying to do it for the right reasons. Like if my company has the solution for something we can help, great. If not, then still trying to keep like the guys and gals and bros that are out doing the JOB, like trying to keep them in mind when we pitch stuff. So
Yeah.
pretty much that.
That's awesome. Two quick things.
Yeah.
Barrett Holmes, which 5th gen looks the coolest?
I got to say the F-22. I think that thing is.
Agree.
I've seen that thing up close. I actually, and little known story, like the F-22 was active in Syria, like helping me target ISIS. Like that fucking thing is the greatest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And it's a shame we cut it, and I probably the wrong call at the time, but like that is the sexiest, most capable thing I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
It is amazing.
Yeah. I think some of the like the belt, like some of the concept helicopters look really, really badass.
Yeah,
too.
but unfortunately we just canceled another one, right?
Yeah.
I
Exactly.
remember being out in, was it Nevada or Arizona, and being out on the flight line and just watching like, dude, a dozen F-22s just screaming down and taking off, and I was like, that is gangster.
They are the greatest. I follow what's his face, the OAF on Instagram. Operator is fuck that guy. He's a former Marine, but it's weird. It's like it's mostly about like soft guys and operators, but he just occasionally, I think like once a month or once a quarter, just happens to get the F-22 demo guy in there because like
Yeah.
what's cool is cool. Like that thing is amazing.
awesome.
Yeah. And then, M. Corbin, thank you very much. Hit the like button and subscribe. We agree. And thanks, fellas. Interesting conversation. Thanks, JK.
And next Friday, we will be back with a gentleman who served as an FBI agent. He was actually an assistant director, not once, but twice.
All right.
We'll have him in studio. Really excited to talk to him. It's going to be a fun conversation. Brian, thanks for joining us. Anything else
Yeah,
you want to
man,
put
it was
out?
great.
Guy, this is awesome.
Anything you want to promote or
I
tell
wish.
people
No,
about?
I'm just a boring suit wearing BD guy.
No,
but
it was
I'll
great,
say,
man.
like this is.
We're all just working slobs
Yeah,
out on
exactly.
the streets now.
I'm just happy to be. I'm
you
just happy to be one now. But no, honestly, like I said, the biggest thing I probably didn't mention was for years doing the cast mission, right? Like for us, like the guys on the ground were our heroes, and so it was cool as like the years went on, and you got to meet a lot of those guys like one on one, like to get their perspective. Like, no, dude, let's it's cool that you're a fanboy at times, but it's like no, like you really pull us out of some really shitty spots right now. So
Yeah.
it's cool to like how it all comes full circle, and I really appreciate you guys sort of bringing on a different perspective. I'm just happy to provide my part. So thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
always,
man.
man. And absolutely, this was exactly like stepping outside of the soft infantry sort of space that we're often in and talk about some more of the strategic level stuff that goes on.
And I think, and we, like I've talked about it before, like having cast come on station when you feel like you're fucked, like when you feel when you feel like, man, like this is it, and having cast come on station, it's like it's a spiritual experience. It really is.
Dude, I'm only mentioning it now because I just saw him recently. But Ski Golembeski, who wrote Level Zero Heroes, I hung out with him a little bit at a conference not too long ago. 'Cause it's funny, Ski actually works at the Air Force Academy now.
Oh, cool.
Like doing something with one of my buddies. But we always loved Ski because like when he wrote that book, that was all about BMG, Balamor Gob, when we were there, and he was the first guy ever to really like. The B1 got more love from like another service, another perspective than our own effing Air Force. And so like, there's been a few times where we've seen our name mentioned in books and whatnot. And like, it feels good that like, guys, even if our own service didn't really like us or appreciate us, like the guys on the ground liking us, that's all that mattered for us. So I wish I could have done it more. And definitely the highlight of my life.
Like the
Yeah.
A10 guys probably feel the same way.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. Like,
Yeah.
and those guys, I will say to anyone who asks, like those guys are the kings of cast. Period. Dot. Like they own the doctrine, the right way of doing it, everything. Like we take our cues from them. So
Excuse me.
Thank you, Brian, again for coming on the show, coming in studio, making
Yeah,
the
man, we
effort to come
appreciate
in
it.
here,
Yeah,
man.
we met Brian at our Christmas party
Yeah.
actually, and yeah, you came in with Josh, right? Did
yeah,
Josh bring you in?
good buddy.
Yeah,
yeah.
Our friend Josh Lees, you will have to dig deep into the Team House archives
Oh,
to find our interview
That's like
with
Team
Josh.
House canon right
Yeah,
there.
yeah, that's old
Team
school.
House lore.
Josh was on with Zach.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
PsyOps dude.
Yeah.
Jeez, okay.
Yeah.
And Josh's story about building a water can or a gas can village is honestly one of the best stories we've ever had on this show.
I'm starting to be convinced that
date.
Josh is the world's most interesting man.
He's fascinating.
Yeah,
He's
he's
so much
awesome.
fun.
No, but it's actually awesome.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see all of you next Friday.
Have a good night.